Chapter 230. In the throne room, Wu Tuo's envoy Meningbu stood respectfully to the side, waiting for his attendants to present gifts to the Dawei emperor. A pomegranate tree made of gold, a pair of white peacocks, 2 ivory tusks, and a glowing shirtu the size of a fist. Emperor Wenxuan looked at the gifts with great interest and satisfaction. This is the sincerity of the Wu Tuo people towards your majesty. Meningbu bowed respectfully to Emperor Wenxuan. Emperor Wenxuan felt extremely pleased. Back then the previous emperor had several sons. He was the most mediocre one, but because he was the eldest son and the crown prince, the previous emperor passed the throne to him. After Emperor Wenxuan succeeded the throne, he was just like when he was young. He had no achievements in politics. If not for Su Jingfu's help, he might not even have been able to sit on the throne. After so many years, he had gone from being ambitious to having to admit that he was just an ordinary person. Later on, he felt that there was nothing wrong with being an ordinary person. From the time he sat on the throne until now, he had finally done something good and displayed the might of the Dawei. This was a merit that would be recorded in the annals of history. Your Wu Tuo kingdom was waiting for an opportunity to invade the Dawei's territory. How can this little compensation count? Emperor Wenxuan said in a low voice. Meningbu lowered his head in fear. Your Majesty, this is all a misunderstanding. The Wu Tuo kingdom is weak and cannot be compared to the Dawei. Even if the Wu Tuo kingdom was 100 times more courageous, they would not dare to invade. However, it is all in the past. There is no point in talking about it now. Not only these gifts, Your Majesty also requests that I present an apology gift to Your Majesty. He looked at Emperor Wenxuan. It is to allow the merchants of the Wu Tuo kingdom to open markets in the Dawei. Emperor Wenxuan frowned. Opening markets in the Dawei's territory is clearly beneficial to you. How can it be an apology gift? How cunning of the Wu Tuo. The crown prince stood to the side and said, Father, why don't we listen to what he has to say? Meningbu knelt down. Your Majesty, the people of Wu Tuo have no intention of invading Dawei. Opening a market would only be beneficial to Dawei. Does Your Majesty remember the historical records of the previous dynasty's wise ruler? He once sent an envoy to the West Moon Kingdom to open a market, and learned the art of horse husbandry from the West Moon Kingdom. Later on, the country's war horses were illustrious and the cavalry was valiant. He paused for a moment. The people of Yuchuo are poor. If we can open a market in Dawei, we can trade with Dawei, and the people of Yuchuo will no longer have to live in poverty like before. Furthermore, the Utopia Kingdom is willing to offer 50% of the harvest from the market to Your Majesty. Meningbu's flattery only made Emperor Wenxuan feel comfortable and not moved. However, Meningbu's last sentence was exactly what the emperor wanted to hear. One had to know that the state treasury had been empty for the past few years. Because of the war between Huayuan and the Rundu, they had used up a lot of money. Raising an army required a lot of money. Why did Emperor Wenxuan accept the Utopia Kingdom's request for peace? Other than his dislike of war, it was also because he was embarrassingly short of money. After fighting a war, who knew how long it would take to recuperate? Moreover, without money, how could they fight a war? Now that they had opened a market, they could receive 50% of the profits every year. Dawei was so big, and there were many merchants in the Utopia Kingdom. It sounded like a good deal. Emperor Wenxuan subconsciously looked at Su Jingfu beside him. He still trusted Su Jingfu. If not for Su Jingfu's support back then, he would not have been able to sit in this position so steadily for so many years. Su Jingfu only stood at the side with a smile, and did not say anything. Emperor Wenxuan immediately understood and said, We can accept the request for peace. However, setting up a market is a very important matter. We are the Emperor of Dawei, and we cannot casually reply to you. Let us think about it carefully before we give an answer. Meningbu was not disappointed. He knelt down gratefully and said, Thank you, Your Majesty, for your kindness. The Utopia Kingdom's emissary behind him also knelt down and shouted, Long live the Emperor! Emperor Wenxuan was in a very good mood, but the Crown Prince's expression was somewhat ugly. He glanced at Su Jingfu with unconcealable malice in his eyes. After the Utopia Kingdom's emissary left, only Su Jingfu and the Emperor were left in the hall. The eunuchs beside him helped Emperor Wenxuan to the back of the hall. Emperor Wenxuan asked, Prime Minister Su, what do you think about setting up a market in Dawei? Although Meningbu is willing to give 50% of the profits to your majesty, this old subject thinks that we should not jump to conclusions. Su Jingfu said. In the current confrontation with Yudo, Dawei has the upper hand. We cannot be led by the nose by Yudo. Moreover, they are offering 50% now, but Yudo is very cunning. When the time comes, if they hide the profits, it will be difficult for your majesty to verify everything. Therefore, now is not the time. When Emperor Wenxuan heard this, he also felt that Su Jingfu's words made sense. He nodded and sighed. Prime Minister Su, the only person who can share my burdens is you. We believe in you. Su Jingfu smiled. Sharing your majesty's burdens is the responsibility of a subject. This old subject should do so. I am willing to sacrifice my life for your majesty. When the crown prince returned to his residence, he was so angry that he kicked over the table in front of him. The servants around him were shocked and immediately knelt down. No one dared to step forward. Only a red-clothed servant walked out. Ignoring the crown prince's rage, she walked to his side and said gently, Your Highness, why did you lose your temper the moment you returned to your residence? Did you meet an annoying person outside? The Guangyan looked at the beauty beside him. In the entire residence, when everyone was afraid of him, only this woman was fearless and walked over as usual. However, this fearlessness did not make him dislike her. Instead, it made him feel that she was sincerely concerned about him. I met an annoying person. The crown prince held Xiang and walked into the hall. As he walked, he said, Prime Minister Su, that old bastard, dared to ruin my plans. He sat down in front of the couch and casually poured himself a cup of wine to calm his anger. Xiang leaned into his arms and smiled. Why is it Prime Minister Su again? Recently, just by listening to this servant, Prime Minister Su has already made your highness unhappy for several days. You're right, Guangyan snorted. That old fart is now taking advantage of his old age to meddle in this consort's affairs. In this consort's opinion, it won't be long before he will also meddle in this consort's affairs. I think God thinks that he's too meddlesome, and wants him to have no descendants in this life. These malicious words made Xiang giggle. She reached out her slender jade-like hand, and took the cup of wine from the crown prince's hand. She took a sip and smiled sweetly. Of course. With your highness like this, you will have many children in the future. What are you hinting at? The Guangyan pinched her face. The beauty smiled and avoided him. The anger in his heart unknowingly turned into lust. Just as he was about to pull her over and kiss her, someone outside said, Your Highness, someone wants to see you. Who is it? The Guangyan's spirits were dampened, and he said impatiently, Wu Tuo's envoy, Mr. Ma Ningbu. The crown prince was startled. He put down his wine cup and waved his hand. Let him in. Xiang also stood up. She tidied her dress and stood beside the crown prince. Ma Ningbu walked in. He had the appearance of a typical Yudo. He was short and stout and looked honest and amiable. However, when his eyes moved, he looked cunning. He walked to the crown prince's side with a smile and bowed. Your Highness, we meet again. When the crown prince saw Ma Ningbu, his irritation in the hall was aroused. He only said, Sit. Ma Ningbu sat down opposite the crown prince. You've seen the opening of the market, the Guangyan said. It's not that I don't want to help you. I've already done my best. Meningbu was still smiling, and there wasn't the slightest hint of annoyance on his face. Your Highness has already agreed with the king to help the Wu Tuo kingdom open a market in the Great Way, and the Wu Tuo kingdom will naturally help your Highness obtain everything your Highness wants. Could it be? He said unhurriedly. Your Highness has already given up on that position? Nonsense. The Guangyan said angrily. What do you know? Currently, there are many people in Dawei who secretly support the fourth prince. The crown prince and General Fengyun have a grudge against each other. The Dawei emperor favors the fourth prince. No matter how you look at it, your Highness is at a disadvantage. The crown prince gritted his teeth and didn't say anything. Although he was the crown prince, as long as Emperor Wenxuan didn't issue an edict to pass down the throne, he wouldn't be able to sit comfortably as the crown prince. Originally, he had chased Xiao Huijin out of Shuajing with great difficulty. However, he hadn't expected that the Battle of Jiang would allow him to regain his reputation. How could he be willing to let that coward, the Guangshui, sit on the throne? This isn't because of your highness, Yingxiang muttered. It's clearly because of Prime Minister Su. Our highness is also very willing to help the Yudo kingdom open a market in Dawei. Ma Ningbu couldn't help but raise his head to look at the person who spoke. He couldn't help but be stunned by the beauty of this servant. However, he quickly recovered from his daze and said, Prime Minister Su? Prime Minister Su has been obstructing us recently. It was because of him that news of the Battle of Jiang was leaked. Your Highness, Ma Ningbu said with a smile. Are you sure that Prime Minister Su is on your side? What do you mean? The Guangyan asked cautiously. Nothing, Ma Ningbu said with a smile. I just think that Prime Minister Su is a smart person. Xiao Zhongwu was killed by Prime Minister Su. Since he is a smart person, he would never reveal his trump card in front of others. On what basis does Your Highness believe that Prime Minister Su's display of support for Your Highness means that he truly supports Your Highness? Don't try to sow discord between my relationship with Prime Minister Su. The Guangyan sneered. Cunning Yudo, why would I fall for your trick? It's fine if Your Highness doesn't believe me. Ma Ningbu said with a smile. However, I still have to say one more thing. If Your Highness is just unwilling to part with Prime Minister Su's connections, and doesn't care too much about Prime Minister Su himself, then you don't have to be so troubled. Because, Ma Ningbu said softly, Shuajing and Dawei and Su Jingfu aren't the only people who can help Your Highness. Just like how Xiao Zhongwu can be replaced by Xiao Huijin, Su Jingfu can also be replaced by someone younger. With the same methods and connections, a young eagle is easier to train than an adult poisonous snake, isn't it? The Guangyan looked at him thoughtfully, but Ma Ningbu laughed loudly and stood up. Your Highness, you don't have to give me an answer so quickly. In a few days, when His Majesty hosts a banquet to welcome Ambassador Yudo, it won't be too late to give me an answer then. He ordered the attendant behind him. I'll go back first. In a few days, I'll listen to Your Highness' good news. Ma Ningbu left. Only Yingxiang and the Guangyan were left in the hall. The Guangyan's expression was uncertain as he thought about Ma Ningbu's words. Although he had righteously expressed that he would not sow discord because of Ma Ningbu's words, in his heart, there was still a trace of wavering. Su Xiang was a smart man. Recently, he had frequently disagreed with him on the matter of the Wu Tuo. He clearly knew that if he didn't do as the Wu Tuo said, he might lose everything, but he still acted willfully regardless of his position. He had originally thought that the older he got, the more unreliable he became, but now, the Guangyan was not so sure. Could it be that Prime Minister Su had been bought over by Guangyan a long time ago? The He family was bustling these days. Bai Rongwei and Xiao Jing came to visit again a few days ago. They were talking about the marriage between He Yan and Xiao Ju. As everyone knew, at the celebration banquet, His Majesty had bestowed a marriage between Chu Zhao and Su Pingting, and He Yan and Xiao Ju. Chu Zhao and Su Pingting were going to be married next month. After Bai Rongwei asked an expert to calculate the wedding date of Xiao Ju and He Yan, 2 dates were set. One was the 7th day of the new year, and the other was the 10th day of the new year. Both were auspicious dates for marriage. He Yan was not in the Fu. Although he was an official without any real power, he still had to do things every day, even though they were all miscellaneous things. When He Yinxing heard Bai Rongwei's words, he immediately frowned and said, Then wouldn't there only be a month to prepare? Isn't it too rushed? He Sui was originally very happy, but when she heard He Yinxing say this, she also felt that it was a bit inappropriate. Second young master, he does not need to worry, Bai Rongwei said with a smile. Ruby and I have already started preparing for Huijin's marriage 2 or 3 years ago. However, Huijin, this child, has never liked a girl. Even if we prepared, we could only put it aside. Now that His Majesty has bestowed a marriage, and Huijin likes Miss He very much, there is no need to delay. Tomorrow, I will have the Fu send over the list of betrothal gifts. 2 or 3 years ago, He Yinxing was still doubtful. You don't even know who military governor Xiao likes. How can you prepare the betrothal gifts? This time, it was Xiao Jing who spoke. Xiao Jing said seriously, In the Xiao family, marriage does not depend on family status. As long as it is a girl that Huaijin likes, it will definitely be the best. Therefore, the betrothal gifts will definitely not be small. Yinxing is not good with words. Eldest young Master Xiao, please do not take offense. He Sui glared at He Yinsheng. We are not complaining about the betrothal gifts. Yin Yin is my daughter. My wife passed away early, so I raised Yin Yin. Although our family is not rich, Yin Yin has been pampered since she was young. I don't care about other things, but... He looked at Bai Rongwei, and his usually easygoing and honest face became more serious. The person my daughter marries will definitely love and dote on her, just like how I treat her. The betrothal gifts are for others to see. Yinsheng and I don't spend much money on normal days, so I don't care. What I care about is the life Yin Yin will have after she enters the Xiao family. He smiled. I am a rough man, and I don't know how to speak. I know that the Xiao family has an extraordinary status in Dawei, and it is our family who is climbing up the social ladder. However, I am not boasting, but in the whole of Dawei, my daughter is also unique. I just want to know. His tone was unusually sharp. After Yin Yin enters the Fu, will military governor Xiao still take in concubines? If he does, I don't mind waiting a year or two before marrying my daughter off. If he doesn't, I don't have any objections. He Yinsheng looked at his father in surprise. He had always looked down on He Sui's good attitude towards the Xiao family, and always felt that he was rushing to climb up the social ladder. Even if the emperor granted the marriage, He Yin was a girl, so of course she had to be more reserved. If the emperor felt that the He family was easy to manipulate, then wouldn't He Yin be in a tight spot in the future? Not to mention these rich families. Even if they lived in the alleys of ordinary people like him, they would hear rumors of the husband's family bullying the new daughter-in-law every now and then. He thought that He Sui would go along with Grandma Zhao's words and quickly agree to He Yin and Xiao Ju's marriage, but he didn't expect He Sui's question to be so sharp. Their family was poor, and He Sui married. Even after his wife died, he never thought about remarrying or taking in concubines. This was natural. He Yunqing didn't think there was anything wrong with it, but this was the case for poor families. It wasn't easy to support one more person, but it was different for rich families. Ever since He Yunqing went to school, many of his well-off classmates more or less had a few concubines in their manors. This was the case for rich families, not to mention the children of noble families. He Yinsheng had thought about this before, but every time he thought about it, he deliberately avoided it. Because the emperor's marriage was unchangeable, and the world was like this. It was normal for rich and powerful families to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. If they didn't, the mistress would be scolded behind her back for being jealous. But now He Sui didn't hide it at all and directly said it out loud. And in his words, there was a hint of threat that if Xiao Ju dared to take in a concubine, he wouldn't let his daughter marry him. So what if the emperor decreed a marriage? To put it bluntly, the emperor wasn't young anymore, and He Yin was still in the prime of his life. At most, he would have to endure for a few more years, and he would be an immortal. Who would care about whether the emperor decreed a marriage or not? A new emperor brings in new officials. Who knew what the future would be like? Rules were rules when there was no choice, but when there was a choice, they were bullshit. Bai Rongwei and Xiaojing looked at each other. After a moment, Bai Rongwei laughed and said, Master He, you must be joking. Xiao family has never had a custom of taking in concubines. When my parents-in-law were alive, there were no concubines in the manor. Ruby and I have been married for many years, and there was no one else between us. Huaijin should be like this. Xiaojing also said. Perhaps Master He's words are looking down on Huaijin too much. It's because Miss He is the only woman in Dawei that Huaijin has deep feelings for her. As his older brother, I know Huaijin's temperament very well. Once he has decided on something, he won't look at anything else. I dare to swear on the entire Xiao family that Huaijin will not have any other woman in his life other than Miss He. If Master He doesn't believe me, you can ask Huaijin face to face again. He smiled and said, Things like oaths, even if you say them thousands of times, people who don't keep their promises will still go back on them. People who truly honor their promises will keep it in their hearts, even if they don't say it again. He Yunsheng looked at Xiaojing and thought to himself, just like how he protected He Yin, This Xiao Ruby also seemed to be particularly protective of Xiao Huijin. The two brothers had such a good relationship, so their family style should be quite good. The two young masters of the Xiao family, one was as gentle as the spring breeze, and the other was as fresh as the autumn water. They were both giants among men. If they said something, they would definitely do it. He Sui laughed loudly. No need. I trust eldest young master, and I also trust military governor Xiao. I don't care whether it's the 7th or the 10th day of the lunar month. Bai Rongwei also laughed. That's great. From today on, I will start writing the invitations so as not to miss the auspicious hour. He Sui and Bai Rongwei discussed marriage matters for a while. Then Bai Rongwei and Xiao Jing got up and left. After they left, He Yunxing looked at He Sui and asked, Father, eldest young master Xiao just said that military governor Xiao won't take a concubine in the future. How much do you think he said that? He Sui said, 50%. What? He Yunxing almost jumped up. Didn't you just say that you trust the two brothers? You said it so confidently that I really believed it. I didn't grow up with them. I only heard about them from others. How do I know if they are telling the truth? Distance tests a horse's strength, and time reveals a person's heart. I've only met them a few times. Do you think I can read minds? He Sui scolded. Then I just want a guarantee from them. Xiao family also knows that although our family is poor and not a government official's family, we are not easy to bully. If Yan Yan is wronged in their family, I will make them suffer even if I have to risk my life. Come on, He Yunxing didn't believe it. Even if we risk our lives together, we can't do anything to them. He Sui slapped him on the head. Why do you always praise others and diminish your own prestige? When can you learn from your sister? Learn from what? Learn from her and smile when she sees military governor Xiao? He Yunxing sneered. Besides, if military governor Xiao really wants to take a concubine in the future, we will be so anxious here. Maybe He Yan, that idiot, won't even care about it and will stupidly help count the money. She won't. What? He Sui lowered his head and smiled. Yan Yan won't. This child looks very arrogant and willful, but her heart is not bad. Sometimes she can be a little stubborn. Xiao Ruby said that once his brother has set his mind on something, he won't look at anything else. Yan Yan is the same, He Yunxing said nostalgically. When we were young, I took her to the market to pick out dresses. If she liked the prettiest one, she would definitely get that one. Even if we gave her something more expensive or better, she wouldn't want it. I said those words just to scare the Xiao family. If Yan Yan really wants to marry, I won't stop her. I can tell that Yan Yan likes Xiao Huijin. The way she looks at Xiao Huijin is the same way your mother looked at me back then. He Yunxing was moved by He Sui's words at first, but when he heard the last sentence, he immediately stopped being moved. He gritted his teeth and said, Let's not talk about this anymore. Besides, don't talk about how stubborn He Yan is. Didn't she like that fan guy so much before? She doesn't even mention him now. There was one more thing that He Yunxing didn't dare to say. When Fan Cheng died, He Yan was as calm as an ant on the roadside. She didn't even shed a tear. He Sui said, How can that be the same? That fan guy isn't human. He Yunxing. Chapter 231. When He Yan returned to the Fu, it was already very late at night. He Yunxing told her that Bai Rongwei had come to the Fu. When He Yan heard that they had even calculated an auspicious date, she couldn't help but be startled. After the new year? Yes, He Yunxing looked at her expression. Do you also think it's too rushed? Not really, He Yan replied. It's just that there have been a lot of things to do in the imperial court recently. Wu Tuo's envoy just arrived in the capital today, so the next 2 months will be very busy. Xiao Ju and I won't have time to prepare for the wedding. He Yunxing frowned. Don't you think it's too fast? It's okay, He Yan said. His Majesty has bestowed a marriage, so she has to get married sooner or later. What does it matter? It's still your marriage. He Yunxing felt a headache coming on. Can you at least be a little more careful? He Yan felt that there was no need to do more. When she got married in her previous life, she also returned to the capital and got married not long after exchanging identities with He Rufei. Time was tight, but everything in the He family had already been arranged. From the dowry to the wedding dress, she didn't worry about it at all. She didn't know if other women were like this when they got married, but in her memory, marriage was just a matter of moving from one family to another. He Sui scolded He Yinsheng. Your sister knows what she's doing. What are you worrying about? Then she looked at He Yan and asked. Yin Yan, when Madame Xiao came over today, she said that the betrothal gifts have already been prepared. Since you have an official position, after you marry into the He family, you don't have to worry about it in the morning and at night, just like before. As for your dowry, Father has already prepared some for you. Of course, our family can't compare to the Xiao family, but you don't have to be ashamed or upset about it. When our daughter marries over, she will have her own salary every month. Isn't it better than a dowry? But there's one last thing. He Sui scratched his head. You've been in Liangzhou for so long, but you haven't embroidered your wedding dress. Now that you are married, it will be too late to embroider by yourself. In Shuajing City, there are many excellent embroiderers. Whichever one you like, I will invite her to make your wedding dress. She should be able to make it in time. That shouldn't be cheap, right? Yin asked. My daughter is getting married. Of course, I want the best. He Sui said carelessly. I have plenty of money. I don't lack money. He Yin said. As for the wedding dress, I have my own plans. Father, don't worry about it. But it's my own marriage. Of course, I'll make my own decisions. He Yin stood up. Father, are you going to choose a wedding dress for your daughter? I didn't mean that. He Sui hurriedly said, but when he saw He Yan's gaze, he was defeated. Forget it as long as you think it's good. However, when you've chosen an embroiderer, you must tell Father so that Father can invite one for you. I know. He Yan looked outside. It's getting late. Father, you and Yinxing should go to bed early. After freshening up, Qingmei came into the room to take away a basin of hot water. She said, if the auspicious date is set, you will get married after the new year. Why do you not look nervous? Getting married is not going to the battlefield. He Yan laughed. What's there to be nervous about? You are too careless. Qingmei muttered. What about the wedding dress? Have you ever thought about what you would look like when you put on your wedding dress and married Governor Xiao? He Yan was slightly stunned. In her previous life, when she married Su Zhiheng, the wedding dress that the He family prepared for her was actually quite gorgeous and exquisite. However, when He Yan looked at herself in the mirror, she always felt a little uncomfortable. The scars under the exquisite dress would always be seen by others. What she had to accept was the unknown future of living in a strange mansion as a woman. Even though she was looking forward to it, there was actually fear in the depths of her heart. But now she was no longer afraid of getting married. Perhaps it was because Xiao Ju had promised her that even after she married into the Xiao family, she would not have to sacrifice anything and be her true self. When Qingmei saw that He Yan did not speak, she thought that He Yan was finally shy. She smiled with relief and went out with the basin of hot water. He Yan was startled by the sound of the door closing. She came back to her senses and lay down on the bed. Suddenly, she remembered something and took out the black jade with a snake pattern from her inner clothes. Under the night lights, the black jade emitted a cold and gentle warmth. After giving this jade to her, He Yan tied it around her waist and was afraid that it would fall off, so she found a string and hung it around her neck like a necklace. A beautiful wedding dress would definitely cost a lot of money. He Sui and He Yinsheng were already struggling to make ends meet because of her marriage. If she took this piece of jade to the embroidery workshop, would they allow her to buy it on credit for Xiao Ju's sake? However, if the news of her buying a wedding dress on credit spread, not only would her face be tarnished, but Xiao Ju's face would also be tarnished. It was still not possible. He Yan put the jade back into her clothes and turned over. Since ancient times, getting married was indeed a matter of spending money. At night, in the empty hall on the mountain, 2 wooden tigers were lying in front of the hall. They were so quiet that they seemed to be asleep. A gray-feathered pigeon flapped its wings and landed in front of the small table. It blinked its black bean-like eyes and pecked at the red wild fruit on the porcelain plate on the table. A slender hand reached over and took off the copper pipe that was tied to the pigeon's leg. After a moment, the copper pipe fell to the ground with a crisp sound. Someone yawned and asked in a daze, "What's wrong?" The person who spoke had a white and round face. His eyes were squeezed into slits by his flesh, but they were not greasy and disgusting. On the contrary, he looked a little funny and amiable. If He Yin was here, she would recognize that this person was Xiao Ju's master, Lu Daichuan, who was good at forging swords. Hey! Lu Daichuan saw the gray-feathered pigeon and was surprised. There's a letter. Who is it from? Who else could it be? It's your precious disciple. The woman with the letter turned around and revealed a charming face. This woman was about 30 to 40 years old. Her appearance was not considered beautiful. What was beautiful was the flirtatious look between her brows. Her eyes were very charming, but her lips were very thin. She appeared restrained and cold. This bit of contradiction was very well mixed together by her. In the end, only an indescribable immortal charm was left. She had such a face, but she wore coarse linen clothes. Her hair was loosely tied up with a branch. She looked like a mountain ghost in the legends. Huaijin sent a letter? Lu Daichuan was surprised. Why did he suddenly send a letter? The beautiful woman sneered. Of course he sent someone to do it. Do you think he came to say hello and show filial piety to us? Of course I know he sent someone to do it. Lu Daichuan smiled. What's the matter this time? This guy is going to get married after the end of the year. His honorable wife still lacks a wedding dress, so I'll have to trouble you to embroider one for him. As the beautiful woman spoke, her anger soared to the sky. Is this some kind of embroidery workshop? He ordered me to do it without hesitation. Oh, don't be angry. Lu Daichuan poured her a cup of tea. After all, our Miss Ru Xing used to be the best embroidery girl in Dawei. Ru Xing was not moved by his flattery. You are already so old. Don't call me miss. What embroidery girl? It was so many years ago. You still remember? Lu Daichuan blinked. Of course I remember. After you went up the mountain, many people looked for you. Your legend is still in the Shuo capital. Lu Daichuan said. Your embroidery skills are so good that you can't find a better one. Huaijin came to you for help because of this. I've never seen a disciple who can order their master around so smoothly. Ru Xing glared at him. Among us, you spoiled him the most. You spoiled him the most. You spoiled him the way he is now. Lu Daichuan was innocent. The 5 of us are his masters. How can you say that I caused all this? Besides, Ru Xing, do you really think that I spoiled him back then? Ru Xing glared at him and didn't say anything. Of course not. When Xiao Ju went up the mountain, he was very young. When he came down the mountain at the age of 14, he was still a teenager. But in the 10 years in between, there was not a single day that was easy. Xiao Zhongwu knew that he would have to carry the Xiao family's future on his shoulders. It would be a lonely and difficult road. He asked the 5 of them to teach and train Xiao Ju in the strictest way. Only by enduring what ordinary people couldn't endure could one achieve what ordinary people couldn't. The world said that Xiao Zhongwu was very lucky. The eldest young master was already so outstanding, but the second young master was even better. If it weren't for his cold temperament, he would be better than all the men in Dawei. But no one knew what Xiao Ju had been like during those years on the mountain. It was definitely not a pleasure. The masters were all human beings, not real gods. They all had 7 emotions and 6 desires. Sometimes when they saw that the little child was really pitiful, they couldn't help but feel sorry for him, but they couldn't show it. After a long time, Xiao Ju didn't have a deep attachment to his masters. Since he left the mountain, he didn't have much contact with them except for going up the mountain once a year. Lu Daichuan understood. Who would be nice to a person who had tortured, beaten, and scolded him since he was a child, and threw him into the array for no reason? Xiao Ju didn't come back for revenge. It was already very good of him. That's good. Lu Daichuan put his hands together. I was worried that after staying on the mountain for so long, he would become cold and unsociable. I was worried that he would be single for the rest of his life. Now I'm relieved. If he didn't get married because of us, it would be a big sin. That's good, Ba. Ru Xing rolled his eyes. What about that girl? Lu Daichuan. What do you mean? Haven't you seen that girl? Ru Xing asked impatiently. That girl from the Shen family has been chasing that bastard for so many years, but he didn't fall in love with her. But he fell in love with that girl, and even asked me to embroider a wedding dress for her. I want to know what's so special about that girl. He stroked his hair. Is she as beautiful as me? Lu Daichuan laughed. She's only 17 or 18 years old. She's in her prime. You're already half a foot into the ground. How can you compare? You haven't been beaten for a long time, right? Ru Xing smiled. I'm joking. Lu Daichuan coughed. I think that girl is very nice. You should trust Huijin's taste. A man's taste can't be taken seriously, Ru Xing said disdainfully. You have to trust Jian's taste. Lu Daichuan smiled. Huijin's autumn sword likes her very much. What? That day she came to help Huijin get the repaired autumn drinker sword. When the sword was in her hands, I could feel that the autumn drinker sword liked her. I've been on the mountain for many years. I've seen more swords than people. Autumn sword takes after its master. If autumn sword likes Miss He, she must be good. After a long silence, Ru Xing said. Maybe that sword has been on the battlefield for a long time and its mind is not clear. That's not interesting. Lu Daichuan said. Do you know what you're like now? You're like an evil mother-in-law who is dissatisfied with the bride. Who are you calling an evil mother-in-law? Ru Xing looked at him with murderous eyes. I'm saying, you should relax. Lu Daichuan said. Huijin is better at judging people than you and me. Since he likes Miss He, we should support him as his elders. As for Huijin, although he usually treats us coldly, you know very well why we've been safe and sound on the mountain for so many years without any disturbances. Ru Xing did not speak. Now that he can get married and start a family, General Xiao did not entrust him to us in vain. Lu Daichuan sighed. The wind in the hall was cold, reminding them of the nights on the mountain. The young boy practiced with a cold face and grew up in the blink of an eye. Ru Xing was silent for a while, then got up and walked out. Lu Daichuan stopped her. Hey, where are you going? Of course I'm going back. Ru Xing gritted his teeth. To embroider a wedding dress for your damned disciple. I've taught a debt collector. It took me a lot of effort to send him down the mountain. Now that he's about to get married, he comes back to make trouble for me. She's the best embroiderer in Dawei. Lu Daichuan smiled and said, the wedding dress she embroidered is the best in the world. Of course. Ru Xing's voice had a hint of a smile. I hope that girl is worthy of my skills. Yan did not know that Xiao Ju had asked her master to embroider a wedding dress for him. Bai Rongwei sent someone to tell him that Xiao Ju was already preparing the wedding dress. He Sui and He Yinsheng were still a bit uncomfortable. How could a woman's wedding dress be prepared by her husband's family? He Yan felt that Xiao Ju was very considerate. He knew that she was not good at this kind of thing, so he took care of it himself. She was happy and relaxed. The wedding date was set for the 10th day of the new year. Xiao family's wedding invitations had been sent out. Everyone in Shuajing knew about it. The He clan didn't have that many relatives and friends. At most, they were just a few good friends that He Sui had when he was still a commandant. He Sui felt that there were not many people coming to watch the wedding. These days he had been worried. He Yan did not think that it was a big deal. Getting married was not going to fight. The more people, the better. Moreover, she did not want to be stared at like a monkey. She put the wedding matter aside for the time being. There were more important things at hand. The Wu Tuo messengers finally entered the capital that winter. On the first day of their arrival, Emperor Wenxian accepted their apology and the wish for peace brought by the Wu Tuo messengers. He Yan was not surprised when he heard the news. However, he did not expect it to be so soon. Emperor Wenxian's heart was biased towards peace. This was not a good thing for her and Xiao Ju. He Yinsheng sat in front of He Yan and asked her. In 3 days His Majesty will be holding a banquet at the Heavenly Star stage. Those Yudo will definitely use this opportunity to disgust you. Can you bear it? I have to bear it even if I can't. He Yan smiled bitterly. Your sister's position is not so high that I can ignore His Majesty's orders. The banquet at the Heavenly Star stage was to show the Dawei's power, and to let the Yudo see Dawei's wealth and power. However, He Yan was a general. He could not accept standing with the enemy who had killed the people of Dawei. He did not want to see those despicable Yudo strutting around in Dawei's territory. Do you think, He Yinsheng paused, will His Majesty allow them to open a market in Dawei? Now that the news had spread throughout the capital, It was no secret that He Yinxing knew about it. He Yin would occasionally tell He Yinxing about the current situation in the imperial court. In her opinion, He Yinxing would most likely become an official in the future, regardless of whether he pursued a civil or military career. There was no harm in letting him know about these things in advance. He Yin shook his head. I don't know. She had asked Xiao Ju about this before, but Xiao Ju had only said that Emperor Wen Xuan had not agreed yet. However, no one knew what would happen in the future. Sigh. He Yinxing sighed heavily. Those Yudo have killed so many people in Dawei. If we still let them in to do business, what would those people think? What would the soldiers who died at the hands of the Yudo think? Really? He wanted to say something, but that person was the emperor. How could he allow him to interfere? He could only swallow his words. However, there was disappointment in his eyes. He Yinxing was not the only one who was disappointed. He Yin knew very well that Emperor Wen Xuan had agreed to the Yudo's request for peace at this juncture. This was also a slap to Xiao Ju's face. So what if they were General Feng Yin? No matter how brave and invincible they were, and how they won a complete victory in the Battle of Jiang, as long as they gained the favor of the emperor, they could still swagger into the land of Great Wei, and even enjoy the convenience and benefits that the merchants of Great Wei could not enjoy. How ironic. However, sometimes, when one thought that they were clever, they would only shoot themselves in the foot with sure too. If everything went smoothly and the Wu Tuo kingdom and Dawei turned hostility into friendship, it would be beneficial to He Rufei, Su Jingfu, Su Zhiheng, and even the Wu Tuo kingdom's ruler who was thousands of miles away. However, it would not benefit the people of Dawei, Xiaoju, or He Yan at all. Therefore, he could not let the blood of the soldiers who had died in vain. He had to let Emperor Wen Xuan be wary of these cunning Yudo and see their true colors. At the Heavenly Star platform 3 days later, He Yan lowered his eyes. At that time, there would be a real show to watch. Chapter 232. 3 days later, Emperor Wen Xian hosted a banquet at the Heavenly Star stage. The Heavenly Star stage was located on a high platform in front of the palace. Further ahead was the ceremonial stage. Yudo's envoy Mainenbu had entered the capital. His Majesty had agreed to Yudo's request for reparations. On the surface, it was to show the magnanimity of the Dawei's ruler, but in reality, it was to show the prestige of his country. This was He Yan's first time attending such an event. Early in the morning, she changed into an official's robe. It was red with flowers and a black belt in the middle. She was not as tall as a man, so the robe was slightly oversized. However, because of her tall stature, it looked elegant in the robe. Now that everyone in the imperial court knew that she was a woman, she did not need to disguise herself as a man. Qing Mei only lightly drew her eyebrows and applied a thin layer of powder. Her lips were soft and pink, so she did not use any lipstick. Her long hair was tied into a ponytail. It was neat and tidy. He Yan looked at the woman in the mirror. She was handsome and elegant. She did not disguise herself as a man, nor was she overly delicate. This was the most pleasing to her eyes since her rebirth. He Yan took a sip of tea from the table and said, "It's almost time. I'll go out first." Qing Mei asked, "Miss, do you really not want this servant to accompany you?" "I'm not going to a banquet. Why would I bring you along?" He Yan laughed. "You can wait for me in the residence." She left the door and got into the carriage. Xiao Ju did not come to pick him up today. Although they were going to get married soon before they were married, He Yan was still Marquis Wen before he became Xiao Ju's fiancé. He had to be clear about business and private matters. It was better not to be too casual on such an occasion. She did not have any servants by her side. It was rare for someone to go to the Heavenly Star stage alone like her. The carriage had been arranged yesterday. When they arrived near the Heavenly Star stage, He Yan got off the carriage and walked towards the Heavenly Star stage alone. There were already some officials who had arrived first. Those who knew each other exchanged greetings and reminisced about the past. He Yan didn't know many people. As he stood there, suddenly someone's excited voice sounded. "Sister He." He Yan was stunned. He turned around and saw Lin Shuanghe running over. He Yan was also dressed very formally today. If he didn't speak, he would look like a talented young man in the imperial court. He Yan asked curiously, "Brother Lin, why are you here? Isn't it said that only officials can be here?" My grandfather and father are both here, Lin Shuanghe said disapprovingly. The Empress Dowager likes me, so she let me come and join in the fun. Young Master Lin came in through the back door again. Lin Shuanghe looked at He Yan from head to toe, his eyes sparkling. Younger sister He, this is the first time I've seen you in your official uniform. Beautiful. Our Huijin is really lucky to have found such an outstanding beauty as his wife. This person always praised without thinking, regardless of whether the other person could accept it or not. He Yan interrupted his flattery. I haven't seen Brother Lin in a long time. What has Brother Lin been busy with? Don't say any more, Lin Shuanghe said with a bitter face. I've only left Shuajing for a year and a half, but there have been a lot of women coming to Shuajing to find me. Ever since I came back, I've been seeing patients every day. Did Sister He not notice that I'm so tired that I've lost weight? He Yan saw his energetic appearance and said, That's not true. If you don't want to see a doctor, you can just close the door and not see them. Why force yourself like this? They're all women, Lin Shuanghe said seriously. A gentleman should have tender feelings for the fairer sex. He Yan was speechless for a while, then said, So that's why Brother Lin is so busy. That's why he completely forgot about helping me find a house. Lin Shuanghe was stunned for a moment. He finally remembered something that he had long forgotten. He looked at He Yan strangely. But aren't you and Huijin getting married on the 10th of the year? Why are you buying another house? It's not for me to live in. He Yan was helpless. I want Father and Yunsheng to change houses. In the past, she had no choice but to be poor. Now she had a proper official position. The money that Xiaoju gave her last time was enough to build a new house in the capital. Although it wasn't as luxurious as a rich family's house, it was still much better than the one in front of her. He Yan thought about it. She would just treat it as borrowing Xiaoju's house. After a year, she would pay him back. So it's for uncle and younger brother. Lin Shuanghe sighed in relief and patted He Yan's shoulder. Don't worry. Leave this matter to me. I promise to help you settle it properly. He Yan, didn't you say that you're too busy to deal with this matter? Ahem, I have time. I can squeeze in a little. So you deliberately didn't help me find a house before. Younger sister He, how can you think of me like that? As they were talking and laughing, Lin Shuanghe suddenly waved behind He Yan. Huijin. He Yan turned around and saw Xiaoju and Xiaojing walking over from the other side. The two brothers had outstanding looks. Walking among the young officials, they were like cranes in a flock of chickens. When they got closer, He Yan bowed to Xiaojing. Xiaojing smiled and said, This is the first time I've come to the Heavenly Star platform with a female official. Miss He is valiant and valiant. Women don't lose out to men. He Yan replied courteously. Lin Shuanghe rubbed his chin and looked at He Yan and Xiaoju for a while. He said, I have to say the two of you look really compatible. He Yan looked at Xiaoju. He was also wearing his official robe today. Coincidentally, the embroidered flower on his dark blue official robe matched the one on her official robe. There was also a belt around his waist. It made him look especially handsome and elegant. Younger sister He, Lin Shuanghe said, Say, if you get promoted a few more times, you can go to court with Huijin. It's really convenient. In the whole of Dawei, this is the first time the two of you are married. Miss He is not married yet. Xiaojing said softly, Young Master Lin, please be careful with your words. If others hear you, it will damage Miss He's reputation. He Yan looked at Xiaojing. Everyone said that young Master Xiao was a gentle and polite gentleman. Now that he had seen it for himself, he had to be so calculative over such a small matter. However, when he said it, it didn't sound pedantic. Instead, it felt that he was thoughtful. No wonder Song Taotao wanted to be Xiaoju's sister-in-law. After all, it was hard to find someone like Xiaojing in Dawei. Just as she was lost in her thoughts, a person suddenly appeared in front of her and blocked her view of Xiaojing without revealing anything. He Yan looked up and met Xiaoju's gaze. She seemed a little unhappy. He Yan was quite protective of his elder brother. Was he afraid that he would have designs on Xiaojing? At this moment, someone called out Lin Shuanghe's name. It was probably Lin Shuanghe's friend. Lin Shuanghe followed the voice. Xiaojing also walked a few steps forward and started talking with her colleagues. Ian finally had some time to be alone with Xiaoju. She moved closer to Xiaoju, opened her sleeves and asked, "What do you think? This is the new official uniform. It's my first time wearing it. Isn't it very romantic and full of murderous aura?" The sun shone on the girl's face, making her fine eyelashes look even more distinct. Her eyes were bright and spirited, and when she smiled, there was a pure youthful spirit. The red official's robe made her look even more heroic, and it was a valiant aura that was completely different from other girls. There were millions of girls in the world. She was the only one who was different. Xiaoju turned around and looked away. Hien saw her like this and pulled back her sleeves. She moved closer and asked, "Isn't it?" "I don't see any murderous aura." Xiaoju couldn't stand her pestering and looked down at her. Her eyes flashed with a hint of a smile. She purposely made her angry. "You're so silly." Hien gritted her teeth. "Why can't you say something nice?" She turned around and pretended to leave. However, when she turned around, she bumped into someone and almost fell into his arms. Chu Zhao stood in front of her and looked at her. "Miss He." "Fourth young master Chu." Xiaoju pulled Hien back to her side. Chu Zhao first looked at Xiaoju, then his eyes fell on Hien. He still had that familiar gentle smile. "I already know about Miss He's happy news. I congratulate you in advance." "Same to you." Hien smiled. "I also wish fourth young master Chu and Miss Su a happy marriage." Chu Zhao heard this and his eyes trembled slightly. He seemed a little sad, but he still saluted Hien and walked away. Hien looked at his back and felt that it was especially bleak. She couldn't help but say to Xiaoju, "Xiaoju, don't you think that fourth young master Chu is quite pitiful?" Xiaoju said coldly, "I don't think so." "How can that be?" "I think that Hien said softly, "maybe he doesn't like Miss Su. People's eyes can't lie. His gaze is very strange. When the marriage was mentioned, he didn't seem happy at all. He even seemed very sad. You're quite observant." "After all, I was blind once before. Of course I have to observe people more carefully now. Unfortunately, the imperial edict has been issued. He can only do this. Do you think Hien turned around and saw that Xiaoju had already walked a distance away. She quickly chased after her. "Xiaoju, wait for me." After a while. "Xiaoju, are you angry?" "No." The officials stood in the square on the Heavenly Star stage. Hien's position was not enough to stand next to Xiaoju. However, in the group of people she was with, most of them thought that she was Xiaoju's fiancée and did not dare to do anything to her. Because she was small and afraid that she would not be able to see the scene on the stage, the first row was specially reserved for Hien. Hien stood at the very front and looked at the emperor on the stage. On the high seat, Emperor Wenxian smiled as he looked at the officials below the stage. The officials were dressed in official robes and stood neatly. Just from their appearance, they looked very dignified. It was said that the Wu Tuo kingdom was surrounded by mountains, and there were very few plains. The palaces were not even half as big as Dawei's palaces. It seemed that every time they held a sacrificial ceremony, the scene would be very shabby. He was old. Although he did not have much achievements in politics, he still hoped to leave behind one or two praiseworthy achievements. Unfortunately, after so many years he did not. Since ancient times, the emperors either had a good reputation or a bad reputation. He did not want to have a good reputation. Even Emperor Wenxian did not have the guts to face the saliva of his descendants. Therefore, ever since he ascended the throne, he had never done anything like building large buildings and temples. Only today's banquet on the Heavenly Star stage allowed him to regain some of his pride as an emperor. The princes sat on one side of the stage. Fifth Prince Guangji was still young. When he saw a beautiful pastry, he wanted to grab it, but he was stopped by Guangshua. Guangshua said softly, "Fifth brother, sit properly. You represent Dawei's face." Guangji pursed his lips, but he behaved himself and did not dare to take the pastry again. Guangyan glanced at the two of them, his eyes full of contempt. Since when Xuandi had set up a banquet on the Heavenly Star platform, he had expressed his sincerity in accepting the Wu Tuo kingdom's request for peace. He was not in a hurry to open a market. He could plan it slowly in the future. As long as he could obtain Yudo's help and eliminate Xiao Huijin, The fourth prince and that bitch concubine Lan would be his prisoners sooner or later. He really couldn't wait to ascend to that position. The Wu Tuo envoy Ma Ningbu stepped forward and knelt in front of Emperor Wen Xian. He praised the emperor's benevolence and broad-mindedness. He was shocked by the prosperity and beauty of Dawei. In the future, the Wu Tuo kingdom was willing to be on good terms with Dawei, and even respect Dawei. Emperor Wen Xuandi was very pleased to hear that. Among the officials below the stage, there were those who were as proud as the crown prince. There were also those who had righteous indignation written all over their faces like Wei Xianzhang. Most of them were angry but did not dare to say anything. Everyone said that the current Dawei's imperial court was no longer surnamed Song, but Su. If that was the case, then that was fine. But what was with allowing outsiders to come to the Heavenly Star platform openly? Since when had the Great Wei fallen to such a state? Among the generals, He Rufei stood at the front with a relaxed expression. There was no hatred in his eyes when he looked at Yudo. On the other hand, Yanhe's eyes were filled with anger. His hands were already clenched into fists. If not for the fact that they were on the Heavenly Star stage and the Emperor was present, he might have rushed up to beat Ma Ningbu up. Xiao Ju stood beside him. Yanhe could not help but whisper. What is this shorty talking about? Who is he trying to fool? The Wu Tuo kingdom wants to be on good terms with Dawei? I will go to the Wu Tuo kingdom and kill 10,000 of their citizens first. Moreover, will their king believe that Dawei is willing to be on good terms with the Wu Tuo kingdom? Seeing that Xiao Ju did not reply, Yanhe was even angrier. He turned his head and mocked. Aren't you General Fengyan? Are you going to watch Yudo behave so atrociously in the Heavenly Star stage? Xiao Ju calmly said. Aren't you the Lieutenant General of Guida? If you want to teach them a lesson, why don't you do it yourself? Yanhe was speechless. He snorted and did not speak. On the other side, Emperor Wen Xian accepted the flattery and gifts from the Wu Tuo kingdom's emissary. Ma Ningbu said, the warriors of the Wu Tuo kingdom are best at wrestling. They usually perform wrestling competitions for the king during ceremonies and banquets. Today they are willing to perform for your majesty. Yanhe said, showing off in front of an expert. Actually, Emperor Wen Xian himself did not really like these things. After he ascended the throne, the imperial court emphasized civil matters more than military matters. However, since the emissary of the Wu Tuo kingdom suggested it himself, he could not reject it to show Dawei's magnanimity. Thus, he calmly waved his hand. Allow. Ma Ningbu turned around. Two burly men walked out from the group of Yudo's emissaries. These two men looked different from the short stature of the Wu Tuo kingdom. They were exceptionally tall and muscular. Their hair was tied into a thin braid behind their heads. Ma Ningbu said, Your Majesty, these are the two best warriors of the Wu Tuo kingdom, Nada Duo and Hu Yunmu. They are willing to perform for your Majesty. The two burly Wu Tuo men walked to the empty space in the middle of the square, and took off their outer clothes. In the cold weather, they were bare-chested. After shouting twice, they hugged each other and wrestled. He Yan stood among the officials and heard the officials behind him whispering, This is indeed a barbarian land. The way they hugged each other is too indecent. Very indecent. He Yan did not feel that it was indecent. He only felt that this wrestling was actually a competition of skill and not brute force. Bystanders only saw them hugging each other and trying to wrestle each other. In reality, it was not the case. Tripping, back wrestling, mentality, and speed were all things that needed to be paid attention to. These two Yudo were indeed not to be underestimated. This wrestling match took a long time to determine the winner. Dawei's officials and the emperor were actually bored out of their minds. This was because the match was not exciting enough. After the match, they had to go against their conscience and praise them. Emperor Wen Xian rewarded the two warriors with a plate of silver each. After Ma Ningbu expressed his gratitude, he said, I heard that Dawei's army is filled with talents and has more warriors than the Wu Tuo kingdom. Since all of you are here today, would your Majesty be so kind as to broaden the horizons of the Wu Tuo warriors? Was this a competition? Emperor Wen Xian's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly became excited. In the past, it was recorded that when a certain kingdom received foreign ambassadors, the princess of the foreign ambassadors had provoked them. In the end, She was severely humiliated by the daughter of a military general with her archery skills, greatly increasing the face of the kingdom. Although he did not know whether this was true or not, this face-slapping was really wonderful. Dawei had a vast territory and many people. Today, there were so many talents in the square. No matter what, the two Yudo would be able to defeat them. Moreover, Dawei had more people. They were thin and upright. Compared to the barbarians, they were pleasing to the eye. For example, Fei Hong and Feng Yun were both first-class handsome men. When they fought, they would definitely make the Yudo feel inferior. Emperor Wen Xian thought about this and said happily, "This is not difficult. The men of Dawei never shrink back. If you choose one of the generals, they will naturally fight." Emperor Wen Xian was not worried that any of the generals would not be able to defeat the Yudo. Firstly, these two Yudo did not even use their weapons and only knew how to use brute force. It was obvious that they were not very skilled. Secondly, if the Yudo were smart, they would not dare to win in front of so many people. After all, the Yudo still wanted to open a market in Dawei. Ma Ningbu smiled and said, "I heard that your majesty bestowed the first female marquis to Dawei." Everyone present was stunned. Emperor Wen Xian was also stunned and said, "That's right. We Yudo have heard of that female marquis fame. I heard that she followed General Feng Yun to the battlefield, and is very brave and intelligent. Is she here today?" Emperor Wen Xian frowned slightly. He did not expect that Ma Ningbu would choose He Yan. In this court full of civil and military officials, the Yudo had chosen a woman. How could a woman's physical strength compare to a man's? Although he had heard of He Yan's achievements on the battlefield, he had also seen it with his own eyes. She was just a thin and weak woman. Compared to the two Yudo, they were like a lamb and a black bear. She is a woman. But she is not an ordinary woman. Ma Ningbu smiled and said, "We also have women who know martial arts, but we have never had a woman enter the court as an official. Since she was brought by General Feng Yun, she must be different from ordinary women." "Your Majesty," he bowed and said, "please let that female marquis fight with our Yudo." Guangshua shook his head. These Yudo were clearly bullying women, or perhaps they were using their position to avenge private wrongs. However, Guangshua knew his father's temperament very well. He placed his face above all else. Since he had agreed, he would not go back on his word. Emperor Wen Xian was silent for a moment and said, "Marquis Wu," He Yan stepped forward and bowed. "This subject is here. You can compete with their warriors." There was a moment of silence, then whispers gradually sounded. Lin Shuanghe hurriedly asked his father, "Father, how can you let a woman compete?" Lin Mu said, "Shut up." Xiao Jing was also worried. Yin He nudged Xiao Ju beside him and could not help but say, "Hey, your wife is being forced to do something beyond her ability. How can you still be so calm? Xiao Huijin, you are truly heartless." Xiao Ju ignored him. He Yan stood up and did not respond to the emperor's words. Instead, he looked at Maninbu and asked, "Envoy Maninbu, what do you think of the two great generals of Dawei?" Maninbu looked at the woman in front of him. Before coming to Dawei, He Yan's name had already spread throughout the Yudo kingdom. This woman had fought side by side with Xiao Ju in Jiang City. During the Runda City War, she had single-handedly caused Huye to suffer a loss. Even the spy that had been sent into the Liangzhou guards had been discovered by her in the beginning. Xiao Huijin was indeed terrifying, but this woman who had appeared out of nowhere was not simple either. She was just like General Fei Hong He Rufei back in the day. She always had the ability to turn the tide. He Rufei, the mighty eagle, had his wings broken with great difficulty. Was another powerful enemy of the Yudo kingdom about to appear? Even if she was just a woman who could kill on the battlefield was no longer a woman. In some ways, she had the right to compete with men. Maninbu said, "General Feng Yun and General Fei Hong are both admirable heroes. They are talents that only appear once in 100 years, no 1,000 years. What a coincidence. This one thinks so too." Ian smiled. Just like the warriors of the Yudo kingdom come to Dawei and want to spar with the heroes they meet, Ian also has heroes that he admires. "If you just want to see my skills, there is no need to spar with me, Lord Maninbu," she said. "I specialize in the sword. I cannot display my full strength in wrestling." We can only spar with the sword. I will not spar with you. Emperor Wenxuan's eyes lit up. He Yin meant that she wanted to spar with Xiaoju? This was good. She and Xiaoju were about to become husband and wife. If she won, it could be said that Xiaoju went easy on her. If she lost, she would lose to her own people and would not embarrassed away. Thinking of this, Emperor Wenxuan immediately said, I approve. I want to see Marquis Wuan's skills and choose the category that Marquis Wuan specializes in. Marquis Wuan, who do you want to spar with? The people who were holding their breaths for He Yin heaved a sigh of relief. Emperor Wenxuan said this to give He Yin a way out. The officials who were watching the show were also disappointed. He Yin naturally chose Xiaoju. A spar between husband and wife could easily produce any result they wanted. Just as everyone was thinking this, He Yin walked in front of the generals. She did not stop beside Xiaoju. She walked in front of He Rufei and looked at him. General Fei Hong. She smiled brightly with a hint of sarcasm. I want to see your sword. Chapter 233. The square was dead silent. No one would have thought that the person He Yin wanted to compete with was not Xiaoju, but He Rufei. Lin Shuanghe muttered. Is Sister He crazy? Yin He also frowned and asked Xiaoju. What's wrong with her? Why didn't she look for you, but went to He Rufei? Xiaoju did not speak. Her expression was calm, as if she had already expected this scene. He Rufei looked at the woman in front of him. The woman in the official's robes had a smile on her face, and her tone was so matter-of-fact. She clearly looked thin and weak, but he did not know where she got the confidence to compete with him. Did she really think that he was He Yin? He sneered in his heart. The woman in front of him looked nothing like He Yin in the past. He Yin heard that Marquis Wuan was frank and cheerful, completely different from his silent cousin. Even if she wanted to act mysterious, shouldn't she have investigated the other party's personality in advance? Such a clumsy imitation with so many loopholes could be seen through at a glance. You want to compete with me? He Rufei slowly said. Everyone in the world says that General Fei Hong's sword is so fast that it can even cut the wind. He Yin smiled and said, Unfortunately, I have never seen it. Since there is an opportunity today, Military Governor Xiao, there will be many opportunities to compete with swords in the future. I don't care about this time, but General Fei Hong's sword is not something that can be seen every day. Young master she chuckled. Are you willing to compete with me? He Rufei curled his lips. Of course, but swords have no eyes. If I lose. He glanced at Xiaoju's direction. Military Governor Xiao won't blame me for this? These words were full of naked provocation. Rumors had it that General Fei Hong and General Feng Yun were natural enemies, and had always been at odds. However, rumors were just rumors. No one had ever seen them truly draw their swords at each other's throat. But today it seemed that the rumors were not just rumors. After all, in this situation, even an idiot could see that there was an undercurrent surging. Among the generals, the youth wearing the dark blue official's robes only smiled faintly and said, No, but there should be a prize for competing with swords. Prize? He Rufei asked, How can we use General He's sword for a normal prize? Xiaoju did not wait for He Rufei to finish speaking. Since we are competing with swords, we will use swords as the prize. He Yin looked at He Rufei, the owner of Qinglang. From now on, the owner of Qinglang. From now on. As soon as these words were spoken, the square immediately boiled over. Is that true? Who would have thought that Military Governor Xiao would bet so much this time? That is Qinglang and Qinglang. He is taking it out for a woman. Isn't he taking it too lightly? I think Military Governor Xiao won't be able to keep Qinglang. No wonder they say that heroes have a weakness for beauties. Looking at Military Governor Xiao's expression, could it be that he has some misunderstanding about his fiancée? That is General Fei Hong. How can he lose to a woman? Emperor Wenxian frowned. He naturally saw the conflict between He Rufei and Xiaoju. But these two had always minded their own business, and lived in harmony for so many years. Since when did their relationship become so bad? Discord between military generals was not a good thing for an imperial dynasty. He Rufei looked at Xiaoju. Military Governor Xiao, are you sure you want to use your sword as the prize? Not my sword, Xiaoju said meaningfully. But your sword as well. He Rufei smiled noncommittally. In his opinion, Xiao Ju's words were purely meant to make people laugh. He had heard of He Yan's reputation on the battlefield, but there were many reasons for winning a battle. Perhaps He Yan was clever, but in a one-on-one battle, he was confident that He Yan would not be his match. There would only be one He Yan in the world, and that He Yan was already dead. Since Military Governor Xiao is so generous, then I will accept. He said, please. Wait. Xiao Ju said. What is it? He Rufei turned to look at him. Could it be that Military Governor Xiao is regretting it? It's not too late to change your mind. Xiao Ju's mouth twitched, and he said mockingly, General He's weapon is one of the best in the world. It's not fair to the opponent. He raised his hand, and autumn wine flew towards He Yan. He Yan caught it firmly. I'll use my autumn wine to compete with you. He Rufei frowned. He Yan smiled. Thank you, Military Governor. She turned and walked towards the empty space, saying, After you, young master. He Rufei paused for a moment, then turned and followed her. The officials in the square, and the imperial relatives on the Heavenly Star platform, all stared at the two people in the square. This was much more thrilling than the wrestling of the two warriors from the Utopia Kingdom. Ma Ningbu also stared at the woman in the red official robes. He hadn't expected He Yan to be unwilling to compete with their Yudo, and he hadn't expected He Yan to pick He Rufei. It seemed that the discord between the two great generals of Dawei was deeper than they had imagined. Guangji whispered to Guangshua beside him, Fourth brother, isn't this wrong? How can General He bully a woman? Even in Guangji's young mind, He Yan as Xiao Ju's fiancé was obviously not as perfect as Shen Muxia as Xiao Ju's fiancé. However, the rules and principles he had learned since young also taught him that men should not bully women and the weak. Guangshua shook his head. Let's wait and see. He also couldn't understand. If He Yan chose He Rufei because she didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, then not only did Xiao Ju not stop her, she even suggested using her sword as the prize. This was even more confusing. Yan he said in a low voice, Xiao Huaijin, are you crazy? How can He Yan defeat He Rufei? Although He Rufei won't take her life. But if your woman suffers a loss in front of so many people, how could she be willing to accept it in the future? She has just entered the imperial court as an official. If she is defeated by He Rufei's sword here, she will most likely be treated as a joke in the future. She will win, Xiao Ju said. Are you joking? Yan He's eyes widened as he looked at him like he was an idiot. At first, I didn't believe people who said you were blinded by lust. I didn't expect you to be just an ordinary man. No matter how bad He Rufei is, he has practiced the sword more than your woman, and has been on the battlefield for a few more years. Even if you don't care about your woman, you should care about your sword. I don't want to help you. I just don't want the two famous swords to fall into He Rufei's hands. I will die of anger. Oh. Xiao Ju's voice still carried a bit of indifference. Then you can rest assured that you won't die of anger for now. Yan he was angry. I'm too lazy to talk to you. In the square, He Rufei slowly pulled out Qinglang from his waist. Qinglang was verdant. As soon as it came out of the sheath, he felt the biting cold of the sword. He Yan's gaze froze for a moment. That was her sword. It was the sword that had accompanied her for many years. It was the sword that had watched her grow from an ignorant and inexperienced recruit to a brave and invincible general. During her most difficult times, she had hugged the sword and sat by the frozen river, thinking about her future path. After not seeing it for many years, the sword had finally come out of the sheath, but it was in He Rufei's hands. Gongzi, he has a good sword, she said. What a pity. He Rufei asked, what's a pity? He Yan smiled but did not speak. He suddenly pulled out Autumn Drinking Sword from his waist. Sword. The two figures tangled together in a split second. Qinglang was verdant. Autumn Drinking Sword was sparkling and translucent. The swords crossed, one green and one white. It was like the autumn morning in the valley, filled with a desolate chill. The green mountains were faintly discernible, and the trees were filled with autumn colors. The sword's aura caused the sand on the ground to fly in all directions. It was clearly a competition of swords, but it was as moving as a dance. General Fei Hong's swordsmanship was naturally excellent. It was fast and accurate, and had an indomitable aura. What was surprising was that the girl holding Autumn Drinking Sword did not seem to be at a disadvantage when fighting with General Fei Hong's sword. How was this possible? She was just a girl. Although she had been on the battlefield, she was only 16 or 17 years old. How could she be a match for a veteran on the battlefield? Could it be that General Fei Hong was going easy on her? He Rufei's heart flashed with a trace of surprise. Before the competition, He Rufei thought that he had already overestimated He Yan's swordsmanship. But now, it seemed that he had still underestimated it. This girl's swordsmanship was skillful, as if she had practiced swordsmanship since she was a child. The tip of her sword was extremely stable and cunning. She could easily avoid his every attack. And her attacks were not weak at all. Like a storm, they were equally matched. Sometimes, because the girl's body was light, it seemed that she was faster. Lin Shuanghe was stunned. He muttered to himself, "My sister is this powerful?" Although he knew that He Yan was powerful, but every time He Yan fought to the death, he had never seen it with his own eyes. He had only heard about it. And in her opinion, He Yan might be skilled in the art of war, but because of a girl's physical strength, her skills could not be compared to a man's. Moreover, her opponent was He Rufei. He Rufei was a little weak when he was young and studying in the Xianchang school. But later, in Dawei, he was on par with Xiao Ju. Lin Shuanghe's heart, which had been in his throat, was now at ease. But what followed was a deeper suspicion. He Yan was so powerful. Didn't that mean that she was at least on par with He Rufei? Did Xiao Ju know about this beforehand? Was that why she was so confident, and dared to use the Autumn Drinker sword as the prize for this competition for He Yan? Wherever the tip of the sword went, there was actually one person who had been overlooked by everyone. It was Su Zhiheng, who was hiding among the civil officials. Ever since he had seen He Yan at the celebration banquet, Su Zhiheng had felt uneasy. But fortunately, he had not seen He Yan again. Today, when Ma Ningbu mentioned He Yan, Su Zhiheng had a bad premonition. This premonition reached its peak when He Yan proposed to compete with He Rufei. If not for the fact that everyone was standing there obediently, and the emperor was watching from the heavenly star platform, Su Zhiheng might have already run away. The woman holding the sword was full of smiles. In an instant, her face overlapped with the face of a certain woman in his memory. Su Zhiheng looked at He Yan, who was fighting with He Rufei, and heard the exclamations of the people around him. He only felt his entire body turn cold. She's back. It can't be anyone else. It can only be her. He Yan is back. He Yan used her sword to block He Rufei's sword. Then, with a light leap, she turned around and went behind He Rufei. The Autumn Drinking Sword understood her very well. Although it was Xiao Ju's sword, she was able to use it with ease. Her gaze was fixed on He Rufei, and her expression was somewhat cold. He Rufei was imitating her sword moves. Perhaps because He Rufei was afraid that his disguise as General Fei Hong would be exposed, even if he took off his mask, even if he did not go to the battlefield, he still deliberately imitated He Yan's sword moves. In fact, he imitated 80% of He Yan's moves. If he was not very close to He Yan, and often saw her use her sword, he was afraid that he would not be able to tell. But, in the end, 20% was missing. And that 20% happened to be the most important 20% for He Yan. 10% came from Xiao Ju's guidance when she was young, and 10% came from Master Lu Buwang's teachings. In all fairness, He Rufei's sword moves were not bad. However, as a person who had never been on the battlefield and had never experienced the edge of life and death, his sword energy would always be reserved. He Yan smiled slightly and stabbed her sword towards He Rufei. He Rufei was shocked and used his sword to block. When the two swords collided, the sword did not move, but the person moved. He took 2 steps back. Suddenly, there were low exclamations around. The civil officials did not understand, but the military generals saw it clearly. Someone said, "General Fei Hong is actually at a disadvantage. He must have been merciful, so Marquis Wuan won." He Yan's smile was like frost. "Young master, he has a good sword, but unfortunately you don't know how to use it at all. Arrogant." He Rufei said darkly, turned around and rushed forward. He Yan smiled and leaned back. Qing Lang brushed past her head and cut off a strand of her hair. Her laughing voice resounded throughout the heavenly star platform. "General He, is it because you haven't been on the battlefield for a long time? Even your sword moves are so slow. She hooked her finger and her posture was extremely arrogant. Can you still lift the sword in your hand? Hirufei's expression was extremely ugly. The emperor's expression was also ugly. Hirufei's actions were like a slap to Dawei's face. This girl was also insensible. Even if his skills were not bad, he should not be so aggressive. Furthermore, he had only temporarily gained the upper hand. How could she dare to speak so arrogantly? He crossed his arms and watched, frowning. Hirufei's swordsmanship doesn't seem to be very powerful now. However, their swordsmanship looks somewhat similar. His heart moved and he looked at Xiaoju. Could it be that you also gave He some advice? You are really like the martial artists on the streets. He was very disdainful. Everyone can worship you as their teacher. Do you still remember that you are Xiao Huijin? You are too noisy. Xiaoju spoke with displeasure. Ha! He saw through him. Why are you pretending to be calm? Are you already worried to death inside? You can't wait to go up and help He compete? However, don't worry. I don't think Hirufei will win. Your girl is right. Maybe it's because he hasn't been on the battlefield for a long time, that even his hands are weak. You really are an embarrassment to Xianchangguan. He and Hirufei's swordsmanship competition to this point was already very unexpected. They had originally thought that this sword competition would end very quickly, because putting aside the male and female identities, one was a new recruit who had just made his debut. The other was a brave general who had already achieved success. No matter how they looked at it, it was He who lost. Even if he won, it would be because Hirufei deliberately did so. If He won quickly, it would mean that General Feihong was considerate of the girl, and did not want to embarrass the girl. This would protect Marquis Wuan's pride. However, He and Hirufei fought for such a long time. After fighting for such a long time, there was still no clear victor. It was impossible that General Feihong was deliberately showing mercy. And looking at the reactions of the other generals, Hirufei did not even have the upper hand. Was it because Xiao Huijin's fiancé was really that powerful? Even Hirufei could not beat her. Or had General Feihong's skills deteriorated over the years? Among the crowd, other than Su Jihing and Hirufei, the one with the ugliest expression was Su Jingfu. Today's events were really out of Su Jingfu's expectations. Those Yudo were very cunning. They also had private dealings with the Crown Prince Guangyan. The Guangyan was short-sighted, narrow-minded, and did not think before doing things. Other than being vicious and merciless, he did not have any of the qualities of a crown prince. Su Jingfu only suspected that the Yudo did not have a backup plan, but the Crown Prince Guangyan already had a grudge against him. If not for the fact that he had invested so much effort in the Guangyan over the years, and that he was so close to success, he would have wanted to abandon the darkness and join the light. The Guangyan had some reservations about him. Ever since the Battle of Jiang, the Yudo had been very dissatisfied with him. But so what? In the Dawei Imperial Court, he could cover the sky with one hand. Even if the Yudo wanted to do something, they could not do anything. Today, when Ma Ningbu proposed to compete with He, it was out of Su Jingfu's expectations. In the end, the people competing in swords were He and Hirufei. This made him feel that something was not right. He was the daughter of a military officer at the city gate. Everything that he did must have been instructed by Xiaoju. When Xiaoju proposed to use swords as the wager, it was clear that he did not have good intentions. Su Jingfu had been rivals with Xiaoju for so many years. He had watched him grow from a young man who barely held on to the family's lintel to the current right military commander. Sometimes he understood Xiaoju better than he did. He had obviously set a trap for Hirufei, and Hirufei had foolishly walked right into it. Or maybe Hirufei did not see through it, but was conceited and did not believe that he would lose to a woman. Everyone was watching He and Hirufei compete in swords. They were amazed that He and Hirufei's swordsmanship was on par. But was that really important? Could it be that Xiaoju did all this just to let his woman humiliate Hirufei in front of all the officials? Su Jingfu did not think so. Hirufei and Xiaoju did not have any enmity before, but Hirufei later sought refuge with him. To show his sincerity, he even sent his confidant to Liangzhou City in an attempt to assassinate Xiaoju. Although he failed in the end, he did not succeed. However, Su Jingfu saw He Rufei's sincerity. He had the support of civil officials, but he also needed a military general. He Rufei appeared at the right time. Although Su Jingfu did not understand why He Rufei chose him, he could clearly protect himself. But later on he thought about it. Officialdom could change a person the most. Even a brave general would willingly offer his sword in the face of greater benefits and a higher position. He Rufei. He Rufei. Su Jingfu's uneasiness was like a ball of thick ink. It wrapped around him in an instant. He looked at He Rufei, who was fighting with the woman on the field, and his heart sank. If something happened to He Rufei, would it implicate him? After all, he and He Rufei had been very close since Yuan Baozhan in Liangzhou City. The tip of the sword carried a murderous aura as it stabbed from behind. However, the person who was stabbed seemed to have eyes on the back of his head. He gently leaned to the side and the tip of the sword missed. Young Master He's swordsmanship looks a little familiar. He Yan smiled and said, but I can only see the shape, not the spirit. How to use this sword? Her lips curled up with a murderous look. Do you want me to teach you? She suddenly turned around and stabbed. With a bang, the tip of the sword pierced He Rufei's chest. However, it only went in a little, and did not go any further. Young Master, he actually came to the Heavenly Star platform wearing soft armor? He Yan said in surprise. How afraid of death are you to do this? Could it be that you have many enemies and are afraid that someone will come for you midway? He Rufei sneered. You talk too much. It's your swordsmanship that is too weak. In terms of provocation, He Rufei really was not He Yan's opponent. When they were in the Liangzhou City Guards, He Yan could provoke every new recruit with just a few words, let alone now. He Rufei also felt mentally strained. This woman's swordsmanship was truly too good. There were no loopholes and he could not find any. On the contrary, she was always able to find his mistakes and see through them at a glance. There were several times when He Yan clearly could have ended the battle quickly, but she did not. She would sometimes cut off a button of his, sometimes cut off a section of his sleeve. She was unhurried, like a cat catching a mouse, making him look inferior to a woman in front of everyone. Inferior to a woman. He was clearly the real He Rufei, clearly the young master of the He family, but he had to live according to He Yan's lifestyle. He lived as if he was He Yan's substitute. In the end, he was still being said that he was inferior to He Yan. Don't think that he could not see that those people were talking and pointing behind his back. The current General Fei Hong could not compare to the previous General Fei Hong. Why? Why did he have to be compared like this? Why did he have to live in someone else's shadow and be inferior to a woman? It was ridiculous. That woman was already a dead person. How could a dead person compare to him? The one who lived to the end was the winner. He held his sword and stabbed at He Yan's back from a tricky angle. This was General Fei Hong's most powerful swordsmanship. He had learned it for a long time. It was said that no one could avoid General Fei Hong's last sword. The tip of the sword was about to pierce the woman's back. Everyone's hearts were in their throats. In the next moment, Yin Qiu accurately parried his sword. The woman in red did not turn her head. Instead, she turned her hand and thrust her sword back. The tip of her sword was swift and fierce. He Rufei was startled. He wanted to dodge, but the woman did not really want to stab him. She jumped behind him and viciously kicked his knee. He Rufei was caught off guard. His knees went soft and he knelt down. He immediately felt a cold sensation on his neck. The woman in red looked down at him with a smile. She silently moved her lips. It was too far away for others to hear, but He Rufei saw it clearly. Big brother, she said. Are you worthy to use my sword? Chapter 234. In an instant, a chill spread through his limbs and bones. He Rufei opened his eyes wide in shock and stared at the woman in front of him. What appeared in his mind was the scene when he first saw He Yan, for the first time when he returned to the capital. At that time, He Yan had already changed back into a woman's clothes. He stood in front of He Yan and watched the woman who used his name for many years call him Big Brother. A subtle jealousy and resentment appeared in his heart. How could he not be resentful? He was clearly the real eldest young master but he had been replaced by someone else for many years. If it was said that he was forced by the situation in the past, then when He Yan left the He family and stepped onto the path of joining the army, Fate had already broken free from everyone's control and rushed towards a future that no one could have predicted. He Rufei actually didn't like to practice martial arts, even though his body had already recovered. The He family had never had a general, but because He Yen acted on her own, he had to learn the same sword moves as He Yen. The same eating habits, the same lifestyle, the same handwriting, the same martial arts, even the same temperament. He and He Yen each played the role of the other's substitute. This feeling was so uncomfortable that it finally reached its peak when he returned to the capital and compared himself to others. So he suggested that He Yan's eyes be blinded. A blind woman could only be bound to the back residence from then on, unable to make any waves. He also didn't have to worry that one day others would find out that he was different from the original General Fei Hong, and that his cousin was very similar to General Fei Hong. However, even if she was blind, He Yen didn't fall silent. He Yen, who couldn't see the light, was only depressed for a period of time. Later on, He Rufei went to the Su family and saw He Yen secretly practicing the sword. She was a blind woman who was secretly practicing her sword skills. She seemed to have sensed someone's presence and stopped what she was doing. She asked tentatively, "Is someone here?" He Rufei didn't say anything and turned to walk out. When he returned to the He family, he made up his mind that He Yen couldn't be left alive. He Yan's life was a threat to the He family. It was also a constant reminder to him that he wasn't General Fei Hong, and he would never be able to compare to General Fei Hong. Until He Yen died, He Rufei was finally able to relax. His sword skills were imitations of He Yan's, but now, in the hands of this woman, it was as weak as a child's play. The way she looked at him was full of mockery, and the way she called him Big Brother gave him goosebumps. He Yen glanced at him and bent down to pick it up with a smile. She looked at He Rufei, who was kneeling on the ground after being kicked by her. She smiled and said, "Many thanks to young Master He. The azure sword will be mine in the future." She held a sword in each hand and turned to walk out of the square. Everyone was stunned. This was definitely not something that He Rufei could do. A merciful person wouldn't be beaten to the ground by a woman in such a pathetic manner. His kneeling posture was a bit humiliating. He frowned and asked Xiaoju, "He Yen and I were talking bad about He Rufei. I thought it was to flatter me. Now it seems that He Rufei and she really have a big grudge. Do you know how He Rufei offended her?" But before Xiaoju could say anything, he said, "Forget it, I don't want to know." No one in the square spoke. They were all stunned by this result. Who would have thought that General Fei Hong would be defeated by a woman? Ma Ningbu's eyes moved slightly. Before anyone could say anything, He Rufei suddenly jumped up from the ground. He pulled out a dagger and fiercely pounced towards He Yen. "Be careful." Lin Shuanghe couldn't help but blurt out. Chu Zhao also couldn't help but look nervous. He Yen frowned and dodged. He Rufei missed but didn't give up. The dagger in his hand seemed to be shining. It was unknown whether it was tempered with something else, but he continued to close in on He Yen. In the next moment, Xiaoju flew forward and reached the square. He casually took autumn wine from He Yan's hand and kicked He Rufei's dagger away. The tip of the sword brushed past He Rufei's neck, leaving a thin line of blood. "If you move again," Xiaoju's eyes were cold. He warned coldly, "I don't mind losing here." The coldness on his neck stimulated He Rufei to come back to his senses. He looked at the man in front of him. Xiaoju's indifferent eyes completely woke him up. Xiaoju and He Yen were different. That woman only wanted to scare him, but the man in front of him really wanted to take his life. He Rufei forced a smile. "I'm just sparring with Marquis Wen. Military Governor Xiao is too nervous." "Sparring?" Xiaoju's eyes were sharp. He said sarcastically, "I didn't think that young master He liked to use sneak attacks when sparring. I also didn't think that young master He was so focused on winning." As soon as he said this, the officials immediately began to discuss. "Yes, sneak attacking a woman. That's impolite. If you agree to a bet, you have to accept defeat. That's not how a man should act." But that Marquis Wuan's reaction was really fast. He didn't even succeed. This means that this woman's bravery is not empty words. She really has real skills. Could it be that General He is really inferior to her? Speaking of which, this woman's surname is also He. If she becomes a general in the future, which one do you think will be more powerful? Those who practiced martial arts had outstanding hearing. When He Rufei heard the discussion of the officials, he couldn't help but clench his fists tightly. He felt his head hurt from anger. Again. He Yan was already dead. Why was there another He Yan with the same name? Why was he still inferior to her? On the Heavenly Star platform, Emperor Wen Xian's expression was already very ugly. He originally thought that he would be able to show off a graceful sparring match in front of the Wu Tuo emissary. He didn't expect that in the end, he would lose face. Not only did He Rufei lose to a woman, he didn't look good. That was fine, but in the end he even tried to sneak attack her. What was this? Today he really made a fool of himself. Yin Xiu still didn't leave his neck. He Rufei's gaze was fixed on He Yan, who was standing behind Xiao Ju. Even though he had thousands of doubts in his heart, in front of everyone and with Xiao Ju in front of him, he could only reluctantly smile and say, "I lost. Marquis Wuan is indeed a heroine. I was just joking with you. I hope you don't take it to heart." He Yan looked at him and smiled back. "It's fine. I didn't take it to heart." He Rufei heaved a sigh of relief. As long as He Yan didn't force him, he could cover up this matter for now. It wouldn't be too late to plot in the future. However, he didn't expect that Xiao Ju and He Yan were already targeting him. Could it be that they had discovered the truth about the assassination attempt on He Yan? He Rufei was just thinking about this when he heard the woman in front of him laugh lightly. "But young master why do you still hide a poison dagger when you already have the emerald gem sword?" Her voice was neither loud nor soft, just loud enough for everyone in the square to hear. In an instant, a stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Everyone looked at He Rufei in a different light. Poisoned? Is that true? Why would General Fei Hong carry a poison dagger? He Rufei didn't expect He Yan to suddenly attack. Panic flashed across his face as he reprimanded. "What nonsense are you talking about?" "Is that so?" He Yan was still smiling and wasn't angry at all. She smiled and said, "Perhaps I saw wrongly. If that's the case, young master do you dare to use the dagger to make a cut on your hand? If it's fine, I'll believe you. There's no poison on the dagger." He Rufei was speechless. The dagger was indeed poisoned. If there was no blood, it would be fine. If there was blood, the poison would quickly seep into the dagger. Within a few steps, one would vomit blood and die. Recently, because of various things, he was uneasy and suspicious. Thus, he carried this dagger with him. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he wouldn't take it out to hurt others. However, the provocative attitude of this woman in front of him reminded him of He Yan who had passed away. It easily aroused the anger and violence in his heart. Thus, he couldn't help but take action. And now Xiao Ju actually had something on him. Wait, a trace of shock flashed past his heart. Could it be that He Yan deliberately provoked him from the beginning just for this moment? But how did she know that he was carrying this dagger? He Yan was a woman. Naturally, it was impossible. Then she must be Xiao Ju. Could it be that there was someone in the He family who knew Xiao Ju? He didn't speak for a long time. In the eyes of the crowd, he was guilty. Not to mention other things, just this competition alone had caused He Rufei's image in the eyes of the officials to plummet. If what He Yan said was true and this dagger was dipped in poison, then when He Rufei took advantage of He Yan's absence to launch a sneak attack, not only was he a sore loser, he was also vicious and vicious. If it wasn't for Xiao Ju, who knew what would have happened? However, was the General Fei Hong of Dawei actually such a person? Emperor Wen Xian only felt that he had lost all his face today. He didn't want to say anything. Su Jingfu stood among the civil officials. His face was so gloomy that it looked like it could drip water. He Rufei was actually so useless. He lost to a woman, and was even caught red-handed. Since it was Xiao Ju who made the move, He Rufei probably didn't even know that he had fallen into their trap from the beginning. But Su Jingfu pondered in his heart. What was Xiao Ju trying to do by beating around the bush? Lin Shuanghe suddenly spoke. "Your Majesty, this commoner will know if young master He's dagger is poisoned with one look. Why don't you let this commoner take a look to prevent misunderstandings between the two generals?" To be honest, Lin Shuanghe didn't have any bad feelings towards He Rufei. He was different from Yan He. He and He Rufei were schoolmates who improved together. Although Lin Shuanghe didn't know what had happened between Xiao Ju and He Rufei, Based on his understanding of Hirufei, she shouldn't be the kind of vicious person who would sneak attack someone from behind. There might be some misunderstanding between them. At this time, he still hoped that Xiaoju and Hirufei could mend their relationship. At least, they didn't need to be at daggers drawn. He thought that he had good intentions. However, Hirufei paused for a moment and gritted his teeth. No need. This dagger is indeed poisoned. The officials were in an uproar. Emperor Wenxian said angrily, Hirufei, why did you bring a poisoned dagger to the Heavenly Star platform? When Hirufei heard these words, he immediately knelt down and bowed towards Emperor Wenxian. He raised his head and said, Your Majesty, these few days, Shoa City hasn't been peaceful. A few days ago, I was attacked by assassins. Not long ago, my residence was attacked by thieves. I suspected that someone was trying to harm me. In order to prevent any accidents, I hid a dagger in my clothes. However, today, I was anxious to spar with Marquis Wuan and forgot that the dagger was inappropriate. I'm sorry, please punish me. He Yan looked at his fluent lie and couldn't help but raise his brows. Hirufei was also a talent. He thought of an excuse in such a short time. Although this excuse was forced, it was still an excuse. When Su Jingfu saw the situation, he stepped out and said, Your Majesty, I've also heard about the theft from General He's residence. Although it was inappropriate to carry a dagger, it wasn't a crime worthy of death. Today's banquet on the Heavenly Star platform is not suitable to see blood. I hope Your Majesty can be lenient. However, General He's actions were indeed dangerous. If he was careless and injured Marquis Wuan, I'm afraid that Military Governor Xiao would fly into a rage. He said these words lightly and with a bit of ridicule. It was obvious that he wanted to help Hirufei turn the matter into a small one. After all, Hirufei had many connections with him in the dark. If something really happened to Hirufei, it wouldn't be good for him to be implicated. Su Jingfu looked at He Yan and smiled. I'm afraid that Marquis Wuan was quite frightened. Everyone looked at Su Jingfu and Xiaoju. The two of them were sworn enemies and everyone in the court knew that. Xiaoju was cruel and heartless, everyone knew that. However, his fiancée Wuan Marquis was always smiling. She was also gentle and had a sense of propriety when conversing with others. She seemed to be an easy person to talk to. Moreover, in front of so many people, if He Yan continued to be unforgiving and aggressive, not only would it make her seem unreasonable as a woman, it would also make Emperor Wenxian unhappy. After all, this was considered a family scandal. It was best not to blow it up in front of outsiders. Su Jingfu gave him a way out. Emperor Wenxian was happy to speak and reprimanded. Hirufei, hurry up and apologize to Marquis Wuan. Hirufei hurriedly saluted He Yan and said, I'm sorry, Marquis Wuan. Just now I was too competitive and almost hurt Miss He. Fortunately, Miss He is fine. Although he was speaking to He Yan, his gaze was fixed on Xiaoju, who was beside He Yan. In Hirufei's opinion, He Yan's actions must have been incited by Xiaoju. He wasn't worried about He Yan, but he couldn't help but be afraid of Xiaoju. However, Hirufei was also somewhat proud of himself. So what if she was Xiaoju? Once Emperor Wenxian spoke, no matter how dissatisfied he was, he could only drop the matter. Prime Minister Su was still the best. It was worth it for him to lose a trusted aide and form a relationship with Su Jingfu. Just as he was thinking this, he saw the Dawei's right army commander standing in front of him. He lowered his eyes and looked at him with silent mockery, as if he was looking at a clown. Hirufei's heart was immediately filled with anger. Before he could speak, He Yan spoke. He Yan said, Young Master He, you don't need to apologize to me. After all, you didn't really hurt me. If you had hurt His Majesty today, young Master He would have died. Hirufei's expression changed. What did you say? He subconsciously looked at the Emperor on the Heavenly Star platform. I said. He Yan bent down to pick up the dagger that Hirufei had dropped. He played with it in his hand and then looked at him. He slowly said, Young Master He, you did everything possible to hide a dagger on your body. Was it really to hurt me? I'm just a woman. Why would young Master He do this? The person that young Master He really wants to hurt is His Majesty. At the end of his words, his voice was as sharp as a knife. Everyone present couldn't help but tremble in fear. He Yan, He Rufei didn't wait for her to continue and sternly interrupted He Yan. Don't make slanderous accusations. You are framing me, Your Majesty. He hurriedly looked at Emperor Wen Xian and cried out. This subject does not have such malicious intentions. I don't know how this subject offended Marquis Wuan or Military Governor Xiao. They actually want to frame this subject for injustice. Su Jingfu also didn't expect that He Yan would directly accuse He Rufei of regicide. Hearing this, he hurriedly said, Marquis Wuan, you can't speak carelessly. General, he only accidentally injured you during a spar. Why do you have to force him to his death? Your Majesty, this subject followed the Fuyue army to quell the rebellion. I only wish for the Dawei to prosper, and its people to be at peace. This subject's lifelong wish is to protect Dawei's land for Your Majesty. Your Majesty, please believe in this subject's loyalty. He Rufei shouted. Ma Ningbu's eyes widened slightly. He really didn't expect this to happen. This was very interesting. Although He Rufei had cooperated with the Yudo didn't truly trust him. After all, He Rufei's methods of leading troops were obvious to all. If the two great generals of Dawei joined forces, it would definitely not be a good thing for the Yudo kingdom. Now that they were fighting, as long as one of Emperor Wen Xuan's arms was broken, a hole would be torn in Dawei. He didn't intend to speak. The emperor sat on the high throne and looked at his subjects who kept kowtowing with a strange expression. Although he was a mediocre emperor and wasn't good at court affairs, he still had the natural trait of an emperor. He was suspicious. It would have been better if he didn't mention it. Once a seed was planted, the way he looked at people changed. On the other hand, when the generals heard He Rufei's words, they couldn't help but speak up for He Rufei. That's right. General, he disregarded his own life in order to quell the rebellion in Xichang. His loyalty is obvious to all. How could he have the intention to harm Your Majesty? Marquis Wu An's words are too much. If he really had the intention to harm Your Majesty, why would he risk his life to fight a war? I heard the people in the barracks say that General Fei Hong is loyal and unafraid of death. He's definitely not someone like that. All sorts of discussions entered He Yan's ears. He Yan smiled faintly and declined to comment. Only when the scene gradually quieted down did she open her mouth and slowly say, General Fei Hong is loyal to the country, majestic and awe-inspiring, riding alone against 1,000, unparalleled in the world. Of course, he wouldn't commit treason and regicide. But she smiled and looked at He Rufei, her eyes gradually turning cold. Young master are you General Fei Hong? He Rufei felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. The woman in front of him looked at him with a cold smile. Her gaze was so disdainful, as if she was looking at an insignificant ant. She looked down on him. Chu Zhao was stunned. Someone beside him muttered, What does Marquis Wuan mean? What do you mean by General he is General Fei Hong? Of course, General he is General Fei Hong. Yin He frowned and looked at He Rufei with a questioning gaze. He Rufei said, What did you say? I say. This time, without waiting for him to finish, He Yan interrupted him first. He Gongzi, after pretending to be General Fei Hong for so long, aren't you tired? I think it's time for you to take off this mask, she said lightly. The Heavenly Star platform instantly became lively. Even if Emperor Wen Xian was present, he couldn't control the development of the situation. He Rufei felt as if he had been stripped naked and thrown out in broad daylight. The sun was so glaring that he couldn't open his eyes. Su Zhiheng also felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His legs were trembling, and his eyes were full of fear. There was only one thought in his mind. Run. But just as he was about to move, he realized that his legs were weak, and he didn't have the strength to move. What nonsense are you talking about? He Rufei forced himself to maintain his composure and said hatefully. Is Marquis Wuan crazy? Pretending to be General Fei Hong? What mask? His Majesty personally conferred me the title of General Fei Hong. How can it be fake? If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext. I thought that Marquis Wuan was a heroine with a broad mind. I didn't expect her to be so narrow-minded. If I had known, I wouldn't have competed with you. What's the point of saying these things now? Ian looked down at him. You've been pretending to be General Fei Hong for so long, but you haven't learned anything from her. General Fei Hong dares to take responsibility for her actions. What about you? You've already done it. Why don't you dare to admit it now? Marquis Wuan. Emperor Wenshuan looked at He Yan with an unfathomable gaze. What do you mean by that? Your Majesty, He Yan saluted Emperor Wenshuan. General Fei Hong won't betray De Wei or Your Majesty. But young master he will. This young master he isn't the real General Fei Hong. You're talking nonsense. He Rufei couldn't help but say. I'm not General Fei Hong. Who is General Fei Hong? He Yan's lips curled up. His tone was so gentle that it was almost strange. Young master have you really forgotten about your cousin who accidentally drowned? As soon as he said this, the entire place fell silent. Su Zhiheng almost fainted. Su Jingfu's face was pale. Emperor Wenshuan clutched his chest and coughed several times. The eunuch beside him hurriedly handed him a handkerchief to massage his chest. Emperor Wenshuan finally said, He Yan, do you know what you're saying? What Wu Tuo envoy? What sword dance? None of that mattered now. Emperor Wenshuan stared intently at He Rufei on the ground. He Yan's words just now, with just a little bit of thought, he could understand what she was talking about. However, no one was discussing it at this moment. It was simply too shocking. Wei Xuanzhang's eyes widened in disbelief. Yan He's brows were tightly knitted. Lin Shuanghe stared blankly at He Rufei, unable to accept what he had just heard. Your Majesty. Xiao Ju, who had been quiet all this time, finally stepped forward. He glanced at He Rufei before saying, Young master, he isn't General Fei Hong. Or rather, the General Fei Hong who led the Fuyue army to quell the Western Chang rebellion, and the General Fei Hong who returned to the capital to receive his reward are not the same person. This young master he doesn't know how to fight. He only knows how to receive rewards. Everyone on the Heavenly Star platform fell silent. Emperor Wenshuan's voice contained restrained anger. Do you have proof? Xiao Ju smiled. Yes. Chapter 235. On the high seat, the emperor looked at the letter in the hands of the palace servant, and did not speak for a long time. He Rufei's heart seemed to be tightly gripped by an invisible hand, gripping it so tightly that his heart ached. At this point, he was certain that the thief who broke into the He family that night and stole the letter in the exquisite box was Xiao Ju. But how did Xiao Ju know how to open the exquisite box? She could enter and leave the He family as if no one was there. If there was no spy who tipped her off, could it be? He looked at He Yan and vaguely remembered that when he was sparring with this woman, she called him Big Brother. It contained a myriad of emotions, like a malicious spirit that came to collect debts. Could it be that she really? The real General Fei Hong was once a classmate of this official at the Xianchang Pavilion, Xiao Ju said. After the Battle of Huayuan, this official found that there was something suspicious about General Fei Hong's identity. After returning to the capital, this official went to the Xianchang Pavilion. Someone set fire to the Xianchang Pavilion's library and attempted to burn General Fei Hong's old handwritten notes. Xiao Ju said in a low voice. Fortunately, the arson was unsuccessful. This official compared the handwritten notes of the Xianchang Pavilion with the military books that General Fei Hong once read. The handwriting is the same. But young master He's handwriting is not similar. Just based on this point, how can you prove General Fei Hong's identity? Su Jingfu slowly opened his mouth and stared at Xiao Ju with an unfathomable gaze. A person's handwriting will not always be the same. With the passage of time, it is not impossible for it to change. He never thought that Xiao Ju would beat around the bush to talk about this matter. This matter sounded so ridiculous that it made people laugh. He Rufei's cousin was the real General Fei Hong, and He Rufei was just a fake who took over the family's home? How was this possible? No one even knew the name of He Rufei's cousin, let alone a woman. How could she have such great ability? He thought that Xiao Huijin was joking, but when he saw He Rufei's expression he was shocked. In an instant, many things that he didn't understand in the past suddenly became clear. He Rufei was quite famous among the generals, and did not rely on the support of a civil official like him. Even if he wanted to take part in the competition for the throne, he would not be in a hurry. Why was he in such a hurry to cooperate with him? Instead, it seemed like he wanted to use him to hide something. Although Su Jingfu had his suspicions, he ordered people to investigate and found nothing, so he temporarily dispelled his suspicions. Now it seemed that Xiao Ju was telling the truth. Although he didn't know how Xiao Ju knew about these secrets, if something really happened to He Rufei, it would be bad for him. Thinking of this, no matter how unwilling he was, Su Jingfu could only speak up for He Rufei at this juncture. This is only one of the pieces of evidence. Xiao Ju calmly said, "Bring a witness." Someone was brought to the square by the imperial guards. It was a woman. She was very timid, and when she saw so many people in the square, she was so scared that she fell to the ground. "Madam Jiang," Xiao Ju said, "in front of the emperor, tell him everything you know without missing a single word." Su Zhiheng's face was as white as paper, and he was on the verge of collapsing. He had been looking for Mother Jiang's whereabouts all this time. Before, he had already heard the news, but the people he sent out were all empty-handed. Later, because of Fuwang, he thought that He Rufei had found Mother Jiang. He Rufei wanted to use Mother Jiang to threaten him, but he never thought that Mother Jiang had been found by Xiao Ju. When Mother Jiang saw the emperor, she was so scared that she kowtowed again and again, tears almost falling out. Your Majesty, this humble woman really doesn't know anything. This humble woman is serving Su family's Yinyang." That day, Yinyang said that she wanted to kill young mistress. It was eldest master's idea. This humble woman only dared to watch from afar. They pressed young mistress into the water and suffocated her to death. This humble woman heard Yinyang call young mistress General He. Young mistress' eyes were also blinded by them. This humble woman didn't do anything. This humble woman really doesn't know anything. Heavens! What does this woman mean? The drowned young mistress Su was the real General Fei Hong, and they killed her to silence her? So eldest master Su also knows about this? But isn't eldest master Su deeply in love with his deceased wife? What kind of deeply in love is this? It's simply hair-raising. Lin Shuanghe muttered. Brother He, is young mistress Su? Yin He also couldn't hide the surprise in his eyes, wondering if he was dreaming. Wei Xianzhang was pushed by his colleague beside him. Teacher Wei, so the General He in your school back then was actually a woman? Didn't you notice? Wei Xianzhang didn't speak, his mind filled with disbelief. He Rufei back then, he didn't like He Rufei very much. If it wasn't for Sherbao's pleading, he wouldn't have allowed him to enter the school in the first place. That youth was diligent and eager to learn, but unfortunately he didn't have any talent in academics. In terms of martial arts, he wasn't outstanding either. The Xianchang school nurtured the future talents of Dawei. For such an ordinary person, it was fine to go to an ordinary school. However, He Rufei later led the Fuyue army to fight the Western Chang people, which made him look at him in a new light. Those who could protect their country were all good men. Now that he thought about it, He Rufei had already shown a different side of him when he was in the Xianchang school. For example, he wore a mask all day long and was always alone. The teachers had always thought that he felt inferior because of his ugly appearance, but now they all understood. It turned out that the clumsy and hard-working youth was a girl. He was afraid of being discovered, so he had always been alone. He couldn't describe the feeling in his heart. Wei Xianzhang had always thought that women should stay at home to help their husbands and children, and shouldn't show their faces in public. The women had long hair and short knowledge, but now, they couldn't say anything harsh. They only felt that the deceased General Fei Hong was respectable and pitiful. Fifth Prince Guangshui quietly pulled the Guangshua beside him. Fourth brother, why don't I understand what they're saying? What happened to General Fei Hong? Guangshui suppressed the surprise in his heart and said, nothing. He looked at He Rufei kneeling in front of the emperor and sighed in his heart. He remembered He Rufei. He Rufei had become famous in the Fuyue army. Later, it was discovered that he was the eldest son of the He family, and everyone in the court praised him. For a young master of a good family to go to war, it was something that required courage. Moreover, General Fei Hong's heroic appearance was legendary among his subordinates. He also admired him. But now, Xiao Ju had revealed the truth of this matter. The brave general who disregarded his own life and charged on the battlefield was actually a weak girl under the armor. After winning the war, the merits weren't hers, the praise wasn't hers, and even her identity wasn't hers. In the end, she died under the conspiracy of her own family. Hearing this, people felt that the heavens were cruel. The emperor's gaze was heavy as he looked at the civil officials. Su Zhiheng, you also knew about this matter? No, this official was wrongly accused. Su Zhiheng's legs went soft and he knelt on the ground. It was this bitch who slandered me. I didn't. I'm her master. Her master, He Wanru, was jealous of Foreign and secretly harmed Foreign, causing Foreign to drown. When this official found out about this matter, I killed He Wanru to avenge Foreign. However, this official never knew that Foreign was General Fei Hong. This official really didn't know. His tears flowed down his face and he spoke with great sincerity. Anyone who saw him would feel that this person was innocent. He coldly looked at Su Zhiheng's hypocrisy. Suddenly, he felt that this spineless man in front of him was completely different from the green-clothed youth he met at the hunting grounds. The crown prince couldn't help but say, "Military Governor Xiao, you can't just convict General He based on a few notes and a few words from a servant, right? This is De Wei's General Fei Hong. Moreover, isn't the truth you're saying a bit too outrageous? How can a woman be so powerful?" Guangyan didn't have any dealings with He Rufei, but he knew that He Rufei seemed to have some relationship with Prime Minister Su. At this moment he spoke up for He Rufei, not for He Rufei or Prime Minister Su, but to shut Xiao Ju's mouth. After all, Xiao Ju was his enemy and not his friend. Of course, it's impossible to convict eldest young master He based on this alone. Moreover, his eyes were filled with mockery. Eldest young master He's crimes aren't limited to this. Guangyan was stunned. Su Jingfu knew that this was bad. He heard Xiao Ju say, He Rufei colluded with the enemy and committed treason. In order to prevent his identity from being exposed, he secretly colluded with the Yudo during the Battle of Huayuan. He didn't hesitate to sacrifice the lives of De Wei's soldiers in exchange for the Yudo's mercy. Ma Ningbu had been watching the show from the sidelines. He never thought that this fire would suddenly burn in front of him. He was so shocked that his expression changed slightly. No one spoke. The cold wind in the square whistled through the fluttering flags. It was as if the wronged souls of those who died on the battlefield had finally arrived at the table to plead their grievances. He Rufei, Xiao Ju sneered. You're such a coward. Military Governor Xiao, some things can't be said without clarifying the situation, Su Jingfu said. Xiao Ju was unmoved. He only ordered his subordinates to present the evidence to the emperor. Eldest young master He's residence was robbed. It said that antiques and cultural relics were stolen. It's just a small amount of money, but the He family panicked and searched the entire city for the thief. Xiao Ju said faintly, why? Because eldest young master He himself knows that once the stolen items are made public, his reputation will be ruined. He Rufei gritted his teeth and said, You, 3 letters. The young man had already turned to the emperor. 2 of them are from the Yudo. The last one, he glanced at Su Jingfu and smiled, is from Prime Minister Su. Emperor Wen Xuan suddenly looked up. If the previous incident with He Rufei only gave him shock and disbelief, then Xiao Ju's last sentence made him feel a great sense of anger and betrayal. Su Jingfu and Yudo? He was a mediocre emperor. He liked to be a hands-off boss, but that didn't mean that he liked to be played by others. This trampled on the dignity of the emperor's family. How could he tolerate this? Su Jingfu was stunned. He subconsciously knelt down and said, Your Majesty, I'm not disloyal. I don't know where Military Governor Xiao got these forged letters from to slander me like this. My loyalty to Your Majesty can be seen by heaven and earth. He didn't know where Xiao Ju got the letters from, nor did he know when He Rufei hid them. He didn't think too much about He Rufei. A rude and unreasonable general wasn't worth the effort. But it was his carelessness that pushed him into the fire pit. He Rufei actually kept a card up his sleeve. He didn't know where he got this letter from, but he didn't destroy it. And it was found out by Xiao Ju. Emperor Wen Xuan looked at the letter in his hand. The more he read, the darker his face became. In the end, there was no expression on his face. He already knew in his heart whether the letter was real or not. For so many years, Su Jingfu had been by his side, but he had always turned a blind eye. It was all because of Su Jingfu's assistance when he first ascended the throne. He thought that he was a humane emperor, different from the previous emperors. But now, it seemed that the relationship between the emperor and his subjects was not worth mentioning in the eyes of some people. He gave Su Jingfu power and status, but he was still not satisfied. When he heard the words betray the country, the way he looked at Su Jingfu was no longer friendly. Military Governor Xiao, among the generals, he suddenly asked loudly, he Rufei really abandoned the lives of tens of thousands of soldiers in the Battle of Huayuan for his own selfish desires? Xiao Ju didn't say anything. He just looked at him calmly. He's eyes instantly turned red. Generals were different from scholars. They were on the battlefield and carried swords and spears. They were brothers and comrades who went through fire and water on the battlefield. Their emotions were different from others. When military generals fought, they wished they could protect as many people as possible. What they hated the most was meaningless sacrifice. Yet there was actually such a bastard who would betray his own people and watch them die. All he wanted was his own cheap life. He took a deep breath and stood out. He knelt down in front of Emperor Wenxuan. Your Majesty, please punish He Rufei severely. Take revenge for the innocent soldiers who died in the Battle of Huayuan. The generals were shocked at first, then they fell silent. Finally, they put down their swords and spears and knelt down as well. Your Majesty, please punish He Rufei severely and take revenge for the innocent soldiers who died in the Battle of Huayuan. Their shouts shook the heavens. Ma Ningbu knew something was wrong. He looked at Emperor Wenxuan again, and was also shocked. Xiao Ju said coldly, the Yudo secretly colluded with the officials in the imperial court, causing the people in Huayuan to be plunged into misery and suffering. The soldiers died in vain. Now they are pretending to ask for peace, but in reality, they are harboring evil intentions. Your Majesty, Xiao Ju bowed and saluted. The Yudo's ambitions are clear as day. Your Majesty, please retract your order for peace. As for opening a market in Dawei, that is even more impossible. The most important thing now is to eliminate the officials in the Qing dynasty who are in cahoots with the Yudo. Su Jingfu reprimanded. Xiao Huaijin, you are slandering me. The innocent will be innocent. Prime Minister Su, there is no need to be agitated. Xiao Ju didn't give him a look and looked directly at Emperor Wenxuan. Your Majesty, please retract your order. Emperor Wenxuan suddenly felt exhausted. After being the emperor for so many years, there were not many relaxing days. Most of the time he was exhausted. However, there had never been a time like today, when he felt that he was really old. He was so old that even sitting on this throne felt too high and too cold. Imperial father, the fourth Prince Guangxua, who had been silent all this time, finally stood up and said to Emperor Wenxuan, regardless of whether military governor Zhao's words are true or false, at this time, we must renegotiate our relationship with the Yudo kingdom. As for eldest young master He and official Su, before the truth is revealed, we can't let them go. The General Feihong incident is no small matter. If what military governor Xiao said is true, everyone involved in this incident will not be able to escape responsibility. These words included Su Jingfu. Su Jingfu felt a sweetness in his throat. He felt a lump of air in his chest that made him want to vomit blood. The fourth Prince Guangxua had always been well-behaved. Although he supported the crown princes Guang Yan, and was wary of Guangxua, in Su Jingfu's heart, Guangxua definitely didn't have the guts to fight for the throne. If he did, he wouldn't have dragged it out until now. Guangshua's temperament was similar to Emperor Wenxuan's, with a bit of the useless benevolence of Guang Yan. Therefore he was destined to be inferior to Guang Yan. At this moment, Guangshua's words would be the last straw that broke the camel's back. As expected, Emperor Wenxuan glanced at Guangxua. At this juncture, he didn't hate Guangxua for meddling in political affairs. Instead, he felt that Guangshua's words seemed to provide a solution to the current situation, waking him up from the malice of being betrayed. Su Jingfu looked at Emperor Wenxuan's expression and knew that things weren't good. If Emperor Wenxuan spoke at this moment and accepted Guangshua's words, then He Rufei wouldn't have a chance to make a comeback. He Rufei wouldn't have a chance to make a comeback. That letter would become the evidence that would nail him to death. He couldn't be taken away at this time, leaving only one Guang Yan outside. That idiot Guang Yan wouldn't be able to get him out. And Xiao Huaijin wouldn't let go of this opportunity. After today, he would have no chance to make a comeback. Your Majesty. Su Jingfu's tears flowed down his old face. This old subject has been wronged. This old subject believes that military governor Zhao's words aren't true at all. They're all nonsense. It's said that General Fei Hong and General Feng Yan don't get along. Now it seems that it's true. However, this old subject doesn't know how General He provoked Military Governor Xiao to make Military Governor Xiao do such a thing. Even at this time, he still didn't give up. Military Governor Xiao didn't lie. A woman's voice suddenly rang out. It was sharp and ear-piercing. Ian was startled. He turned around and saw a woman stumbling over from the crowd. This woman's clothes were dirty, as if she had rolled around somewhere. He didn't know where she came from. Her hair was also disheveled, but her face was beautiful. It was actually Madame He. Ian was stunned. He wanted to go forward, but he was afraid of being found out, so he could only stand there. Xiao Ju was also surprised. Irufei was shocked. Madame He didn't even look at the crowd. She rushed to the bottom of the Heavenly Star stage and prostrated herself in front of Emperor Wen Xian. She loudly said, "This old subject can testify. Your Majesty, this old subject can testify. Irufei isn't General Fei Hong at all. He's a fake. Irufei was born with my daughter, but his body was weak. The doctor said that Irufei wouldn't live past 3 years old. My husband and eldest brother let my daughter, Yan, dress up as a man and exchange identities with Irufei." Yan's hands were slightly trembling. Madame He crawled forward 2 steps. "My daughter went to the battlefield when she was 16 years old. She was lucky enough to obtain military merits. When she returned to the capital, Irufei's body had already recovered. When His Majesty appointed generals, Yan and Irufei had already returned to their respective places. This wasn't a big deal." She took a deep breath and pointed at Irufei, who was not far away. But they were crazy. In order to prevent their identities from being exposed, they fed my daughter poison. First, they poisoned her eyes, then they drowned her in the pond. Military Governor Xiao didn't lie to you, Your Majesty, Madam He shouted. My daughter, Yan, is the real General Fei Hong. Chapter 236. Yan was the real General Fei Hong. If the evidence that Xiao Ju had handed over just now was just evidence on paper, it was still suspicious. Now that this woman had personally come out to confirm it, it was a real nail in the coffin. Yan looked at Madame He in a daze. She had never seen Madame He speak so fiercely. She also never expected that one day, she would hear the words, "I'm her daughter." At this moment, Madame He was like any other ordinary mother, screaming for justice for her own child. But why was she here? Xiao Ju also looked at Madame He with a frown. He had promised to make a deal with Madame He to protect He Xining, but Madame He didn't tell Cui Lua what she wanted to do. Xiao Ju didn't know how Madame He came here, nor did he know what she wanted to do. But when he saw Madame He's pale face, he immediately had a bad premonition. Don't listen to this bitch's nonsense, Your Majesty. Irufei anxiously said. She's so sick that she can't think clearly. She's just talking nonsense. I'm not talking nonsense. Madame He suddenly coughed violently, and a trace of black blood flowed out of the corner of her mouth. Yan's heart tightened, and her whole body turned cold. She wanted to go forward, but the woman acted as if she didn't see her. Ignoring the blood on the corner of her mouth, she said loudly, I'm not lying. The He family is afraid that I'll tell the truth, so they've been poisoning me every day. I know that I don't have much time left, so I don't want the truth of my daughter's death to be buried. Your Majesty. Her voice was miserable, like the cry of a dying beast. People speak the truth when they're about to die. I'm telling the truth. If there's any deceit, I'll be struck by lightning and die a horrible death. After I die, I'll go to the 18th level of hell and never be reincarnated. The oath was vicious and severe, but what was even more shocking was her mournful expression. More and more blood gushed out from the corners of Madame He's mouth, and it was almost out of control. Lin Shuanghe wanted to rush out to check, but was stopped by Lin Mu, who gently shook his head at him. It's hopeless. Madame He shouted. Your Majesty, please make a decision for this official's daughter. Your Majesty, please make a decision for General Fei Hong. After saying this, she seemed to finally be unable to support herself, and her entire body went limp. Xiao Ju, who was standing not far from him, instinctively reached out to support him. Madame He looked at Xiao Ju. The young man in front of her was the dream man of De Wei's countless daughters, General Feng Yan. She once saw the scene of this man walking side by side with his fiancée at Yuhua Temple. The legendary cold and arrogant second young master Xiao was actually incredibly gentle when he faced the Yan Yan's girl. He was different from Su Zhiheng, He Rufei, and all the other men who used to deceive their wives. If He Yan was handed over to him, she should be relieved. Her daughter, Yan. Madame He's eyes were moist. She knew that He Yan was standing in the distance and looking at her. That was her daughter. Even though He Yan was a completely different person, even though He Yan's blood was no longer flowing in his body, even though she and her daughter rarely interacted with each other in their previous lives and were like strangers, when He Yan stood in front of her and nodded with a smile, politely calling her Madame He, she could recognize her at a glance. He Yan was fond of sweets. When he ate, he would always hold his chopsticks in the upper half of his mouth. When he encountered something he didn't like, he would pile it up to the edge of his bowl. But in the end he would still eat it obediently. She saw the girl eating at Yuhua Temple and instantly understood something. There was some kind of connection between a mother and a daughter. Military Governor Xiao. She took a deep breath and looked at the young man in front of her with hope in her eyes. Is she? She is He Yan. Xiaoju whispered. In an instant, Madame He's heart was filled with great satisfaction. She said, Good. Perhaps the heavens saw that her daughter was too pitiful. She grew up all alone, deceived, poisoned, and killed. She was no longer around. Yet she was still being used to complete the He family's and Su family's good reputation of having a deep relationship. How much she hated, how powerless she was. Many nights, she looked at the white silk hanging on the beam of the house. She was only one step away from being free and going to hell to atone for her sins. But every time at the last moment, when she thought of He Xining, she had the thought of retreating. What could she do? She could only live like a walking corpse. She didn't know if it was because even the heavens pitied her that she was able to see He Yan again in her lifetime. When she saw He Yan for the first time, when she understood that He Yan wanted revenge and wanted to overthrow He Rufei, Madame He decided that even if she had to sacrifice her life, she would help He Yan achieve his goal. She knew her own body best. Since He Yan died, she was only left with one last breath. She knew that Cui Luo was sent by Xiaoju. She also knew that Xiaoju might know a lot of the truth. She was willing to use her own life to be the last nail. She took the poison and secretly climbed out of the dog hole that He Yan dug when he was young. He Yan probably wouldn't know for the rest of his life that when she climbed out of the dog hole every morning, Madame He saw it all. He Yan thought that Madame He didn't care about her, but in fact, she had been watching her daughter in the dark for so many years. She saw her wearing a mask and playing by herself in the courtyard. She saw her being depressed after being scolded by Madame He. She saw her looking at her with a gaze that changed from admiration to calmness. She saw her putting away all her original self and pretending to be someone else. There were countless times when Madame He tossed and turned in bed at night. If she hadn't watched silently at that time, but had been nicer to He Yan, and let He Yan feel a moment of warmth, perhaps He Yan would have at least a moment of nostalgia and warmth when he reminisced about his life. Instead of dying in the cold pool, and being the victim of a conspiracy for the rest of his life. Don't tell her. I know who she is. She struggled to open her mouth and blood gushed out from the corner of her mouth. Why? Xiaoju stared at the woman in front of her, and felt that she had returned to the day when Madame Xiao left. The heart-wrenching pain was something that those who suffered would never want to experience again. He had tasted the pain before. He didn't expect that He Yan would have to walk the same path as him today. How cruel. Just let her hate me. Madame He's eyes were filled with laughter and tears. I didn't do anything, just let her hate me. In front of Cui Luo, she never mentioned He Yan. Instead, she frequently mentioned He Xining. Even when she made a deal with Xiaoju, she only cared about He Xining's life. She knew that Xiaoju would be able to see and hear all of this. She knew that Xiaoju was someone who valued friendship and loyalty. Perhaps he was the only person in the world who treated He Yan with sincerity. The more biased she was, the more Xiaoju would feel sorry for He Yan. The brave and invincible general on the battlefield didn't understand the delicate tricks of a woman in the backyard. She wanted to use this trick to scheme against Xiaoju, to scheme against him so that he would do his best to treat He Yan well. This was the last thing she could do for Hien. Xiao Ju stared at the woman in front of him. After pausing for a moment, he finally couldn't help but say, "She has never hated you." Madam, he was stunned. In an instant, the world fell silent. Only the words of the man in front of her filled her ears. She didn't have much strength left. Even turning her head was difficult. She could only move her eyes slightly to look at the person she wanted to see, but didn't dare to. She wanted to see the person she was most sorry to in her life. However, her eyes were blurred. She couldn't see the person clearly. She could only see a blurry figure standing in the square. He was tall and handsome. He was as beautiful as a painting. She suddenly remembered the day when she was diagnosed with pregnancy. At that time, He Yuanliang was very happy and asked the doctor to take a look. The doctor looked at her belly and said mysteriously, "A general is the best. If the days are the same, his life will be prosperous. He has a noble position, and is suitable for the world to reward him. Madam's belly is a rare general. If it's a boy, he will definitely rise to the top. If it's a girl, the family won't be peaceful." He Yuanliang asked people to make a lot of clothes for boys. However, Madam He inexplicably felt that the child in her belly must be a little girl. Although He Yen was a girl, he had been a man for so many years. In Yuhua Temple, the mother and daughter met again. However, they were like strangers. Madam He endured the huge waves in her heart, and asked the woman in front of her, "Miss He, why do you call He Yen?" The girl smiled carelessly and replied casually, "Who knows? Ordinary girls don't have the word yen. The river is clear and the sea is filled with yen. Perhaps my parents knew when I was born that I would have to go to the battlefield to protect the safety of the people." Madam He's tears finally fell. She murmured, "Yen yen by the lotus, but can't be carried." She had never thought of letting He Yen go to the battlefield and make a name for herself. As a mother, her initial wish was for He Yen to be a beautiful and carefree little girl. However, this initial wish had unknowingly deviated from the absurd. The tears on her face had not dried yet, but her clenched fists had already loosened. The woman's last breath dissipated, and her life ended like this. Xiao Ju was shocked and subconsciously looked back to find the figure. Beside He Rufei, He Yen stood there in a daze. Her eyes fell on Madam He who was in his arms. She didn't know what Madam He and Xiao Ju said. Their voices were too soft, and the wind was too strong. She could only see that Madam He seemed to look at her. What was she looking at? He Yen of Marquis Wuan, or He Yen of Second Miss He? Qing Lang was back in her hands, but He Yen didn't have a trace of joy in her heart. She just stared at the woman in Xiao Ju's arms. She couldn't wait to rush over, but she couldn't. She couldn't move in front of everyone's eyes. She would be suspected. She was now Marquis Wuan He Yen. She had nothing to do with the He family. If she stepped forward now, she didn't know what kind of consequences it would bring. Xiao Ju turned her head, and gently put the woman's body back on the ground. She looked at Emperor Wen Xian and said, "Your Majesty, Madam He used her life to prove that He Rufei deceived the Emperor. He Rufei falsely claimed the merit, and the He family deceived the Emperor. Such a rebellious person should be executed. I hope that Your Majesty will punish the sinners severely and not tolerate them." "Your Majesty," He Rufei said in panic, "this official is innocent." "Your Majesty," Su Zhiheng also complained loudly, "this official was forced. He Rufei did these things. This official has nothing to do with this official. This official is also a victim. I don't know anything." Emperor Wen Xian frowned. He had a terrible headache. He said in a deep voice, "Someone come, take He Rufei and Su Zhiheng away. Confiscate the He and Su families." He wanted to settle the score. The fourth Prince Guangshua's heart moved. He stepped forward and said, "Imperial Father, that Prime Minister Su." He didn't forget about Prime Minister Su. Su Zhiheng and He Rufei weren't as important as Su Jingfu. It wasn't easy for Xiao Ju to create such an opportunity. If he couldn't use this opportunity to shake Prime Minister Su's position, it would be too difficult for him to have such an opportunity in the future. Su Jingfu's face was extremely ugly. At this time, He Rufei couldn't be saved. If Madam He didn't come out, he could slowly make plans later. However, not only did Madam He appear, she also testified with her life. He knew Emperor Wen Xian too well. Emperor Wenxian's pity for Madame He would catalyze his anger towards the He and Su families. Even he would suffer a calamity. Your Majesty, this old official is loyal to Your Majesty. Your Majesty, please investigate. Su Jingfu looked at Emperor Wenxian with a magnanimous gaze. If it was in the past, Emperor Wenxian would feel that he was being overbearing. Now, as long as he thought of the 3 letters presented by Xiao Huijin and looked at Su Jingfu's attitude, he felt disgusted. He said expressionlessly, "Lock him in the prison and wait for trial." Yes. The 4th prince was overjoyed. The crown prince looked a little flustered. Of course, he didn't want this to happen. However, looking at the current situation, it was clear that Xiao Huijin came prepared today. Even Su Jingfu himself didn't expect this. No one knew how much evidence Xiao Ju had in his hands. One after another, he was afraid that they had been preparing for this day for a long time. Since this was the case, it was better to wait and see. When Xiao Huijin used up all his trump cards, he would think of a way to deal with the aftermath. The Guangyin didn't say anything. He Rufei and Su Zhiheng were both taken away. Su Jingfu couldn't let himself be in such a sorry state like the 2 of them. He adjusted his collar and said lightly, "This old official will leave by himself." When he passed by Chu Zhao not far away, Su Jingfu glanced at Chu Zhao. Chu Zhao lowered his eyes and stood in the crowd of civil officials. Su Jingfu felt a little relieved. He couldn't count on that idiot Guangyan to make a move outside. Fortunately, there was still Chu Zhao. Chu Zhao was meticulous and had followed him for so many years. With him outside, the situation wouldn't be too bad. However, he didn't expect that Xiao Huijin would use He Rufei to deal with him. In this round, he had underestimated Xiao Ju. As for the envoys from Wu Tuo, Xiao Ju glanced at them and said, "Today's incident on the Heavenly Star platform happened suddenly. For the next few days, the envoys can stay in Shuajing City. Once this matter is settled, we can make plans for the future." He turned to Emperor Wenshuan and asked, "What does Your Majesty think?" Emperor Wenshuan's mind was in a mess and he was exhausted. He waved his hand and said, "We'll do as you say." Ma Ningbu's expression changed. He realized that even they couldn't leave now. Xiao Huijin was really something. Everyone knew that his opponent was Su Jingfu, but he just had to target He Rufei. After today, not only would the He and Su families be in trouble, but even Su Jingfu would be in trouble in the future. Sometimes, in a game of chess, it was a contest of 1 or 2 chess pieces. Su Jingfu was fine, but He Rufei's agreement to fight with Hua Yuan had been leaked. Not to mention opening a market, even the peace negotiations would be difficult. As a result, the advantage that Wu Tuo Kingdom had fought so hard for would be gone. It would be hard to guarantee that they wouldn't fall short of success in the future. However, people had to lower their heads when they were under someone else's roof. This wasn't a good time for a direct confrontation. So Ma Ningbu smiled and said, "Of course. Your Majesty." Xiao Ju stepped forward and lowered his voice. Although Madam He is also a member of the He family, she took the initiative to expose the He family scam today and didn't hesitate to risk her life. Seeing that the real General Fei Hong once fought for the Dawei and bathed in blood on the battlefield, "I ask Your Majesty to allow this humble subject to bury Madam He's corpse." Military Governor Xiao, isn't this a bit inappropriate? The Crown Prince frowned and said, "No matter what, she knew about it and committed the crime of deceiving the Emperor. How can you plead for mercy for a criminal? She is General Fei Hong's birth mother." Xiao Ju looked at him with a sharp gaze. "Forgive and forget, Your Highness." The Crown Prince coughed lightly and didn't say anything. Emperor Wenxian had already stood up with the help of his eunuchs. When he heard this, he glanced at the dead woman on the ground and felt a trace of sympathy in his heart. A mother who didn't hesitate to give up her own life for the sake of her dead daughter was truly pitiful. Moreover, she was already dead. Forget it, he couldn't be bothered to care about this anymore. He said, "Permitted." Xiao Ju heaved a sigh of relief. Today's banquet on the Heavenly Star platform wasn't the least bit joyful. Those who died died, and those who were captured were captured. It also allowed people to clearly see a great injustice from many years ago. Who would have thought that the General Fei Hong who wore a mask on the battlefield was actually a different person from the widely loved General Fei Hong, who later became an official of the same court? And that legendary woman died so miserably. It was especially ironic when she put it together with her own experience. The ground was scattered with blood and weapons. After the emperor and the nobles left, the Heavenly Star platform was a mess. The wind seemed to be whimpering, making people's eyes sore. Xiao Ju turned around and saw He Yan slowly, step by step, walking towards Madame He's body. She walked extremely slowly, as if every step took a lot of energy. Her face was pale, like a lost traveler who couldn't find her home, and was about to get lost in the desert. Xiao Ju called her softly He Yan. He Yan didn't feel anything. She stared at the woman on the ground. She walked in front of Madame He's body, and wanted to touch her hand with her trembling hand. Just as she reached out, she retracted her hand. The woman's eyes were already closed, but the corners of her mouth were slightly curved, as if she was smiling, but there was some bitterness in it. This was the first time she saw her mother so closely. In the past years, she could only look at her from afar and couldn't look at her for too long. Otherwise, if Madame He found out, she would be reprimanded again. She wanted to call her mother, but she knew that even if she did, she wouldn't get a response. Her heart suddenly hurt. It was so fierce that it almost suffocated her. He Yan suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Xiao Ju said, He Yan. She softly fell to the ground. On the other side, Lin Shuanghe noticed the movement here and hurriedly ran over. When he saw the blood on He Yan's lips, he was shocked. Sister He, what happened? Did you get an internal injury when you fought with He Rufei? What should we do? What should we do? Xiao Ju carried He Yan from the ground and said to him, Come with me. Then she ordered her subordinates. Take care of Madame He's body. Wait for me to come back. Lin Shuanghe was worried about He Yan's injury, so he didn't say anything and followed Xiao Ju into the carriage. Their movements fell into the eyes of the others. Chu Zhao was slightly startled. His gaze followed Xiao Ju's back. He seemed to want to follow, but a voice sounded in his ear. Now that Prime Minister Su is in trouble, fourth young master, we have to find a way to save him. In a flash, Chu Zhao's emotions disappeared. When he looked at the person in front of him again, there was a trace of worry in his voice. That's how it should be. His colleague next to him poked Yanhe's arm and asked, Yanhe, why are you standing there in a daze? After a long time, Yanhe came back to his senses and shook his head. Nothing. He looked around and didn't see Xiao Ju. He asked, Where's Xiao Huijin? Where is Xiao Huijin? Just now Marquis Wuan vomited blood. Maybe he got injured when he fought with He Rufei. That person replied honestly. Military Governor Xiao took Marquis Wuan and left. Young Master Lin also left. He probably went to treat his injury. But I was wondering why General Fei Hong was so weak that he couldn't even defeat a young girl. It turns out that he wasn't the real General Fei Hong. Ha! What's wrong with being a girl? Yanhe looked at the sky and said in a low voice. General Fei Hong himself was originally a girl. His colleague was at a loss for words. After a long time he said, That's true. It would be great if such a wonderful girl was still alive. Unfortunately, beautiful women have short lives. In the past, I didn't even see what Su Zhiheng's wife looked like. If I had seen her, I wouldn't be able to talk about her. The one I saw was General Fei Hong. That's right, Nan Guang. He thought of something and asked Yanhe, when you were studying at the Xianchang Pavilion, weren't you classmates with General Fei Hong? At that time, she should have been the real General Fei Hong. What kind of person was she? She was a girl. Although she wore a mask, didn't you guys notice anything wrong? No, Yanhe said. What? He thought of the youth who got up in the middle of the night and secretly practiced swordsmanship in the bamboo forest in the backyard. Rain or shine couldn't stop him. He practiced strenuously but stubbornly. At first he thought that it was useless. Now that he thought about it, he was the one who was short-sighted. None of the youths discovered young Master He's identity. It wasn't because they were careless. It was because she had abandoned her female self. She did it better than a man, Yanhe replied. Chapter 237. When Xiao Ju carried He Yan back to the He residence, He Yunqing and He Sui were not there. Only Qing Mei was there. Seeing the pale face of He Yan in Xiao Ju's arms, Qing Mei jumped in fright. Oh my God, what happened to Miss? It's nothing. Lin Shuanghe was afraid that she would be anxious and said, Today I had a duel with someone at the Heavenly Star stage. so I'm a little tired. You are? I'm a doctor, Lin Shuanghe smiled. I'm here to treat your Mississippi. Xiao Ju carried He Yan into the room and placed him on the bed. Lin Shuanghe did not dare to delay, and first checked He Yan's pulse. After a while, Lin Shuanghe said, Sister, he is suffering from depression. In a moment of desperation, she vomited blood. I'll write 2 prescriptions. You can ask your servants to prepare the medicine for her to drink. But what? Lin Shuanghe sighed. This is a psychological problem. Medicine can only treat the symptoms, but not the root cause. Why is Sister He so distressed? I don't think she's a calculative person. Why would she vomit blood? Xiao Ju did not say anything. You guys really scared me today. Lin Shuanghe looked at the 2 swords that Xiao Ju had placed on the table. Why did you attack just like that? He Rufei's matter. I haven't figured it out yet. When I figure it out, I'll ask you again. As for Prime Minister Su, are you confident? After waiting for so many years, Xiao Ju had not made a move. This time, since she made a move against Prime Minister Su, she was prepared to do it for real. A centipede dies but never falls down. If she did not seize this opportunity to completely defeat Prime Minister Su, she would not have another chance like this. Don't worry, Xiao Ju's eyes were cold. I sent him in and did not want him to come out. What do we do now? Lin Shuanghe asked. The palace must be in chaos right now. The relationship between His Majesty and Prime Minister Su isn't something the 2 of us can match. Do you want to go to the palace now? What if Su Dang seizes the opportunity and the emperor's heart softens? Wait a little longer, Xiao Ju said. Wait for what? Xiao Ju's gaze fell on He Yan, who was lying on the couch. She walked to the couch and sat down. Let's wait for He Yan to wake up. At this moment, the He family in the capital was completely blocked off by the soldiers who had come to their door. He Yuanqing's face was ashen as he pretended to be calm and said, How dare you? My son is the General Fei Hong who was appointed by His Majesty. How dare you behave so atrociously here? What General Fei Hong? The leader sneered and said, You're just a swindler who gained fame by deceiving the world. How dare you boast shamelessly here? If you want to be a general, do it in prison. Do it. Madam, he struggled desperately and shouted. What are you doing? Stop, let me go. However, He Yuanqing's heart turned cold as a terrifying thought appeared in his mind. But he still had a glimmer of hope. He looked at the soldier and asked, What is the meaning of this? Today on the Heavenly Star platform, your family's eldest son had a sword duel with someone and was exposed. One of the soldiers who was smashing the signboard of the He family kindly reminded him, There are witnesses and material evidence. His Majesty already knew that your He family had stolen the dragon from the phoenix and deceived the emperor. Master He, you don't have to dream of being the father of a general here. The soldier kicked open the door and saw He Yuanliang. He Yuanliang was hiding under the bed and was trying his best to squeeze in, trying not to be discovered. However, his body was round and smooth, so even if he tried to squeeze in, half of his body was exposed. When he was pulled out, He Yuanliang desperately begged for mercy. Sir, please spare me. They forced me. He pointed at He Yuanqing. How could I harm my own daughter? My daughter, He Yan, also went to the battlefield to protect the people. For my daughter's sake, please spare me. The soldiers looked at this person and felt that it was quite interesting. They originally thought that a person who could raise a woman like He Yan who disguised herself as a man and went to the battlefield was not a simple person. First, they saw Madame He die on the Heavenly Star platform to prove herself. She also had some strength of character. Why was her biological father so weak? People looked down on him. It was said that like father, like daughter. This father and daughter were not similar at all. Second, old Master He, you'd better save your words for General He. Moreover, this is not the only crime that your family's eldest son has committed. Not the only crime. Madam He was stunned. What else? Colluding with the enemy and committing treason. There was some disdain in the soldier's eyes. In order to not expose his identity, Master He personally conspired with the Yudo in private. In the Battle of Huayuan, tens of thousands of soldiers became his human shields to protect him. You want to be spared for such a serious crime? Dream on. Take him away. Madam, he cried and shouted. Impossible, impossible. This is absolutely impossible. He Yuanqing was in a daze and did not say another word. Once the crime of colluding with the enemy and committing treason was exposed, 9 generations of the family would be executed. Even if Emperor Wenxian was merciful, he would not let it go. Moreover, He Yan was already dead. After the truth was revealed, even if He Yan died, he would still have a clean reputation. However, the He family, even after death, would have a bad reputation. He Yuanliang's pleas for mercy were particularly loud in the courtyard, but it was useless. The He family's plaque that had been polished until it was shiny was thrown on the ground and stepped on by the soldiers. The common people across the street looked at it from afar and pointed at it. The sound of the wind blurred the discussion into smoke and dust. The He family was defeated. He Xining was sitting in her room embroidering a square handkerchief. Su Zhiheng went to the Heavenly Star platform early in the morning. He did not know why, but since this morning, He Xining's eyelids kept twitching. She had a feeling that something was going to happen. Even though she was sitting there, her heart was still pounding. She was so distracted that she accidentally felt a pain in her fingertip. Looking down, she saw that her fingertip had been pricked by a needle, and there was a bloody hole on it. The blood stained the handkerchief. She stared at it in a daze. The ominous feeling in her heart grew stronger and stronger. Just as she was about to get up, Lua ran in from outside. With tears in her eyes, she shouted in horror, "Young mistress, something happened." "What happened?" He Xining asked. Second madam, she. "What happened to my mother?" He Xining asked anxiously. Second madam is gone. The handkerchief in her hand fell to the ground. He Xining was stunned for a moment. Ignoring her bleeding finger, she grabbed Lu Er's arm and said in a sobbing voice, "What do you mean my mother is gone? How could my mother be gone? Tell me clearly." This servant heard that Madam also went to the Heavenly Star platform today. Madam was fed poison by First Master. Madam even said in front of the Emperor that Second Miss was the real General Fei Hong. The soldiers have already brought people over. Young mistress, what should we do? He Xining felt her mind go blank. She knew every word that Luer said. Why was it so hard to understand when they were connected? First uncle. Why did first uncle feed mother poison? My sister. How could she be General Fei Hong? Isn't that my eldest brother? What exactly is going on? No one could answer He Xining's question. Just as Luer finished speaking, there was a commotion outside. Old Madame Su's angry roar resounded throughout the courtyard. He Xining looked at the soldiers who had appeared at the door and surrounded the courtyard. At this moment, she was really out of her wits. Young mistress. Luer grabbed her hand in fear. What should we do? Yes, what should they do? The incident at the Heavenly Star platform spread throughout the entire Shuo capital in less than half a day. It was impossible to hide such a big matter. The original fierce General Fei Hong on the battlefield was actually a woman. Later on, the person who appeared in front of everyone and took off his mask was actually her brother. The fact that the two of them swapped identities was already unbelievable. In the end, the He family turned around and killed He Yan. That inconceivable point became disdain for He Rufei's shamelessness and sympathy for He Yan. If the common people were more concerned about the legend of General Fei Hong, then the real chaos in the imperial court was because of Su Jingfu's imprisonment. Su Jingfu covered the sky with one hand in the imperial court. After so many years, many officials in the imperial court were his disciples. Once Su Jingfu fell, many people would fall with him. Therefore, the moment Su Jingfu was imprisoned, Su Jingfu's faction gathered together to think of a way to save Su Jingfu. Why don't I see fourth young Master Chu? An official looked around and didn't see Chu Zhao's shadow. Fourth young Master Chu is Prime Minister Su's most trusted person. I think everyone shouldn't act rashly, lest they all fall into Xiao Huijin's trap. Let's see what fourth young Master Chu has to say first. Since he is Prime Minister Su's son-in-law, fourth young Master Chu will naturally do his best to save Prime Minister Su. Everyone nodded. At this juncture, no one knew if Xiao Huijin had any other tricks up his sleeve. Although they were anxious, no one was willing to be the one to stand up for him. The more important it was at this time, the more selfish the people who formed an alliance because of benefits would be exposed. Chu Zhao had just returned home when Madame Chu saw him. She was startled and asked, "Why are you back?" Chu Zhao smiled. "What's wrong? Prime Minister Su has already." Madame Chu paused. "Why didn't you go and settle some matters? Why did you come back?" She also knew about Prime Minister Su's matter. No matter how much Madame Chu hated Chu Zhao because of Chu Zhao, the entire Count Shijin's residence was already tied to Prime Minister Su. If something really happened to the Su family, how could the Count Shijin's residence gain anything? The world saw Chu Zhao as Su Jingfu's son-in-law, and naturally saw the entire Chu family as Su Jingfu's people. "There's nothing to settle," Chu Zhao said calmly. "Aren't you worried?" "Madam," Chu Zhao interrupted her. "Nothing will happen to the Count Shijin's residence." "Madam, you don't have to worry." Madame Chu looked at Chu Zhao, increasingly confused. Disregarding everything else, Su Jingfu was his teacher. In the past few years, Su Jingfu had hinted to her many times, openly and secretly. Was the 4 treasures of the study that he sent to the Chu family for Chu Zhao every few days really just a simple gift? It was just to support Chu Zhao and warn her not to touch Chu Zhao. To Chu Zhao, Su Jingfu had indeed protected him. Unexpectedly, when something happened to Su Jingfu, Chu Zhao didn't have a trace of worry on his face, as if he didn't care about his teacher's life or death. Madame Chu felt an inexplicable sense of fear. Chu Zhao glanced at Madame Chu with a smile, then turned around and continued walking. Madame Chu looked at his back, and couldn't help but grit her teeth. No matter what, she hoped that the Count Shijin's residence wouldn't be implicated. When he entered his room, a servant came forward and said, "Fourth young master, there's news from missing Xiang. His Highness the Crown Prince hasn't made a move yet." Fourth young master means, "There's no need to worry," Chu Zhao said. "Xiao Huijin still has evidence from the Battle of Mingshui. When that time comes, Prime Minister Su won't be able to make a comeback." Then the marriage between young master and Miss Su. Before Su Jingfu's death, his marriage with Su Pingting was enough to make countless people in Dawei envious. But now that something had happened to Su Jingfu, this marriage would be avoided like the plague. After all, the emperor's anger would be vented on everyone involved. "As usual," Chu Zhao said. The servant responded cautiously and left the room. Chu Zhao looked out the window. He wasn't surprised that Xiao Ju would make a move at this time. The opening of the market was imminent. If there wasn't enough leverage, Emperor Wen Xuan would agree to Yudo's conditions sooner or later. Even if Su Jingfu tried to stop it, it was just to raise the price. But now it was different. The Battle of Huayuan, Su Jingfu's Battle of Mingshui, He Rufei's matter, and Su Jiheng's matter were all suppressed. The emperor's anger would completely destroy this deal. However, the matter of He Rufei and his cousin swapping identities was beyond his expectations. Chu Zhao also didn't expect that the He family was hiding such a secret. No wonder He Rufei would secretly seek refuge with Su Jingfu. He probably knew that with his ability, he wouldn't be able to embark on the path of military exploits like his cousin, Yan. He remembered that on the square of the Heavenly Star platform, he wore red clothes and competed with He Rufei. Yan should have known about Xiao Ju's plan. Otherwise, he wouldn't have cooperated so well. A subtle hint of gloominess floated in his heart. Yan trusted Xiao Ju a lot. So much so that the two of them cooperated so well. Step by step, little by little, they uprooted the He family, the Su family, and the future Su family. There were red wedding cloths everywhere in the room. They were all prepared for his marriage with Su Pingting. Chu Zhao casually picked up the red silk on the table. The red silk was soft and as delicate as a woman's skin. He looked at it for a while, and then his hand loosened. The red silk floated down and fell into the burning stove. In an instant, it turned into ashes, leaving nothing behind. He Sui and He Yinsheng returned to the Fu. When they saw He Yin lying on the bed, they were shocked. "What happened to Yin Yin?" He Sui asked. "Did something happen?" He worked during the day and didn't have the mood to chat with others, so he didn't know about these things. He Yinsheng was also in the academy and didn't hear anything. At this moment, he saw that He Yan's eyes were closed and thought that something big had happened. It's fine, it's fine." Lin Shuanghe was brewing medicine in the courtyard. Hearing this, he walked out and said, Today on the Heavenly Star platform, Himimi was sparring with someone and was accidentally injured. Huijin sent her back and has been watching over her. He Sui asked, "You are?" "Oh," Lin Shuanghe wiped his hands. "I am Huijin's friend Lin Shuanghe. I met Himimi at the Liangzhou Guards. My father and grandfather are both imperial physicians in the palace and know a bit about medicine." Lin Shuanghe. He Yinxing paused. "Is it the white-clothed divine hand that only treats women?" "Yes, yes," Lin Shuanghe said with a smile. Hearing that he was a physician, He Sui's heart relaxed a bit. He asked Lin Shuanghe, "Is there really nothing wrong with my daughter?" "It's really nothing," Lin Shuanghe said with a smile. "It's just that she doesn't have enough strength. These days it's been too cold. I wrote a few prescriptions to nurse her body back to health. These days, I told her not to do any heavy work and just to rest well." He Sui looked at He Yen, who was lying on the bed. Seeing that her breathing was even and she didn't seem to have any problems, he nodded. "Thank you for your concern, Dr. Lin." As they were talking, Xiao Ju came in from outside. He Yinxing was stunned. Why is Military Governor Xiao still here? Huijin hasn't left yet. Lin Shuanghe shrugged. He said that he would leave after Himimi wakes up. Won't that be too much of a delay for you? He Sui asked. Huijin, you're busy. Yinsheng and I can take care of her. It's okay, Xiao Ju said. I'll leave after she wakes up. Since he said so, He Sui and He Yinxing couldn't persuade him anymore. Lin Shuanghe said, "My medicine is almost done. It's drying now. Huijin, remember to feed it to Himimi later." "Isn't there Qing Mei?" He Sui said politely. "How can I trouble Dr. Lin to brew the medicine yourself? Not everyone can brew medicine." Lin Shuanghe smiled. "My prescription is special. I'm afraid that others won't be able to brew the medicine to its fullest potential. It's better for me to do it myself. Besides, Himimi and I are friends. There's no need to trouble me. When I was in the Liangzhou Guards, Himimi took care of me a lot. In that case, thank you very much, Dr. Lin." He Sui was very grateful. Afraid of disturbing He Yan's rest, He Yinxing and He Sui left the room first. As soon as they left the room, Qing Mei ran over and whispered urgently, "There's a young master outside. He said he's here to look for Military Governor Xiao." Xiao Ju asked, "Who is it?" "It's me." Before she finished speaking, someone's voice sounded. They turned around and saw Yan He walking in aggressively. Yan Nongguang, what are you doing here?" Lin Shuanghe asked curiously. "I'm here to look for him." Yan He looked at Xiao Ju. "I have something to ask you." "Go ahead." Yan He looked around. He Sui quickly said, "Yinxing and I will go to the kitchen to help make dinner. You guys can talk among yourselves." After that he left with He Yinxing. Qing Mei also quickly followed. Yan He looked at Lin Shuanghe. "What? You're avoiding me too? You want to ask about He Rufei?" Xiao Ju said calmly. "That's right." Yan He raised his eyebrows. "I'm here to ask you. Did you already know that He Rufei was a girl? That's why you took care of her when she was in the Xianchang Hall? You secretly taught her swordsmanship?" Wait. Lin Shuanghe was puzzled. "We all know that He Rufei is a girl today at the Heavenly Star platform. What do you mean by teaching her swordsmanship? Did I miss something that I don't know about?" Xiao Ju ignored Lin Shuanghe and said, "No. Do you think I'll believe you?" Yan He said angrily. "Since you already knew that she was a girl, why didn't you tell me? I'm a man. Now that I think about it, how could I bully a girl? If I knew that she was a girl, I wouldn't have caused trouble for her all the time." Ever since Yan He found out that He Rufei was a woman, the more he thought about it after he returned to the Fu, the more upset he felt. He boasted that he was a magnanimous man. In the past, he did not find He Rufei pleasing to the eye only because he felt that this brat did not have much ability to begin with and even received Xiao Ju's guidance. But now that he knew the truth, he felt that he was an unreasonable bully who bullied the weak. This Xiao Ju was too despicable. It was fine if he wanted to be the hero who saved the damsel in distress, but why did he have to make others seem so despicable and evil? "I didn't tell you." Xiao Ju frowned. "I only found out not too long ago." "When was not too long ago?" "Jinling, Huayuxian." Yan He was stunned. "Huayuxian?" Lin Shuanghe also realized. Huaijin, you mean that Hua Yuxian told you when we passed by Jinling on our way back? She only said that the person wearing the mask was a girl. I was suspicious, so I started to investigate. Xiao Ju hid part of the truth and said half-truthfully, I didn't expect the ending to be like this. She's called Hien? Yin he asked. We were classmates for a few years. She always used the name Hirufei. Later on, when Su Jiheng got married, I didn't remember the name of his wife. If her mother didn't tell us today, no one would know. Lin Shuanghe also asked, right, I almost forgot. Huaijin, isn't that the same name as Sister He? Oh my god. Lin Shuanghe gasped. Look, Sister He also knows swordsmanship. She's also disguised as a man. She can also go to the battlefield. Could she be the reincarnation of Hien? What reincarnation? Yin he impatiently interrupted his fantasy. The age doesn't even match. Even if she's not reincarnated, she's still a spirit? Or did she ask for revenge in her dreams? Isn't that what's written in legends? Otherwise, how do you explain this coincidence? Also, why did you investigate the He family for no reason, Huaijin? Isn't it to avenge her? I'm afraid it's not just for revenge, Yin he said. He looked at Xiao Ju with a sharp gaze. Hirufei is just a bait. I'm afraid the real person you want to deal with is Prime Minister Su. But I'm curious. Since you want to deal with Prime Minister Su, why don't you show all the evidence in your hands? Aren't you afraid that Prime Minister Su's people will mess up your plan? You can wait and see. Xiao Ju answered expressionlessly. Yin he snorted. I'm not interested in your personal grudges, and I don't want to see how you overthrow Prime Minister Su's faction. But you also know that Prime Minister Su is the Crown Prince's person. Now that you've touched Prime Minister Su, the Crown Prince probably hates you. When the Crown Prince ascends the throne in the future, I'm afraid he won't tolerate you. Or do you plan to? Yin Nongguang. Without waiting for him to finish, Lin Shuanghe interrupted him. Be careful with your words. Yin he stopped talking and looked at Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju's expression didn't change at all because of his words. After a moment of silence, he said, Lin Shuanghe, do you think you can hide everything by burying your head in the ground? Let me tell you, what's going to come will come sooner or later. Xiao Huaijin, since you've made this move, from today onwards, there won't be any peaceful days in the capital. Take care of yourselves first, he said.